I'll just hit record. Don't let the mood change, though. I can stop recording if it changes the mood.
Tell the story of the disc as best
Alright.
you remember.
All right. Well, I can pull it up here, right? I think I still got it saved somewhere on my phone. Let me see if I can find the photos real quick, because I took
I was
photos
res-
of it.
I was reciting it to people for the week and a half after you sent it. They weren't enjoying it.
I remember you saying that. You probably know it better than I do. You want me to just read the whole
I
thing?
did, but yeah, you're gonna need to because I can't remember exactly what he says. Was the way that you could tell it was actually Odin's disc.
Okay, so I hit record in the middle of this because we were talking about just some recent stuff, and then Odin came up again, and we were talking about the story where he plucks out his eye. And so this is a story written by, gosh, I can't remember, Jorge Luis Borges. I don't know if that's how you say it. It's Jorgeluisborges. But this is his story. It's called The Disc. And so it starts, I am a woodcutter. My name doesn't matter. The hut I was born in and where I'm soon to die sits at the edge of the woods. They say these woods go on, right to the ocean that surrounds the entire world. They say that wooden houses like mine travel on that ocean. I wouldn't know. I've never seen it. I've not seen the other side of the woods either. My older brother, when we were boys, he made me swear that between the two of us, we'd hack away at this woods till there wasn't a tree left standing. My brother is dead now, and now I'm something else. And now it's something else I'm after. Sorry, and always will be. Over in the direction where the sun goes down, there's a creek I fish in with my hands. There are wolves in the woods, but the wolves don't scare me, and my axe has never failed me. I've not kept track of how old I am, but I know I'm old. My eyes don't see anymore. Down in the village, which I don't venture into anymore because I'd lose my way, everyone says I'm a miser, but how much could a woodcutter have saved up? I keep the door of my house shut with a rock so the snow won't get in. One evening I heard heavy, dragging footsteps and then a knock. I opened the door and a stranger came in. He was a tall, elderly man, all wrapped up in a worn out old blanket, a scar sliced across his face. The years looked to have given him more authority than frailty, but even so I saw it was hard for him to walk without leaning on his stick. We exchanged a few words, and I don't recall now. Then finally the man said, I am without a home, and I sleep wherever I can. I have wandered all across Saxony. His words befitted his age. My father always talked about Saxony. Now people call it England. There was a there was bread and some fish in the house. While we ate, we didn't talk. It started raining. I took some skins and made him a pallet on the dirt floor where my brother had died. When night came, we slept. It was toward dawn when we left the house. The rain had stopped and the ground was covered with new snow. The man dropped his stick and he ordered me to pick it up. What shall I do? No, why shall I do what you tell me to? I said to him. Because I am a king, he answered. I thought he was mad. I picked up the stick and gave it to him. With his next words, his voice was changed. I am the king of the sections. It's Secgens. I am the king of the sections. Many times I did lead them to victory in hard combat, but at the hour that fate decreed, I lost my kingdom. My name is Isern, and I am of the line of Odin.
How do you
I
spell
do
Isern?
Isern. Yeah, look that up. Keep going. All right. I do not worship Odin, I answered. I worship Christ. He went on as though he'd not heard me. I wander the paths of exile, but still I am king, for I have the disc. Do you want to see it? He opened his hand and showed me his bony palm. There was nothing in it. His hand was empty. It was only then that I realized he'd always kept it shut tight. He looked me in the eye. You may touch it. I had my doubts, but I reached out and with my fingertips I touched his palm. I felt something cold, and I saw a quick gleam. His hand snapped shut. I said nothing. It is the disc of Odin, the old man said in a patient voice, as though he were speaking to a child. It has but one side. There is not another thing on earth that has but one side. So long as I hold it in my hand, I shall be king. Is it gold? I said. I know not. It is the disc of Odin, and it has but one side. It was then I felt a gnawing to my it was then I felt a gnawing to own the disc myself. If it were mine, I could sell it for a bar of gold, then I would be a king. In my hut, I've got a chest full of money hidden away, gold coins, and they shine like my axe. I told the wanderer, whom I hate to this day, if you give the disc of Odin to me, I will give you the chest. I will not, he said gruffly. Then you can continue on your way, I said. He turned away. One axe blow to the back of his head was all it took. He wavered and fell, but as he fell, he opened his hand, and I saw the gleam of the disc in the air. I marked the place with my axe and dragged the body down to the creek bed, where I knew the creek was swollen. There I dumped his body. When I got back to my house, I looked for the disc, but I couldn't find it. I have been looking for it for years. And that's the story.
Oh man, no, I don't think it's Odin's eye. After hearing it again, oh god,
I don't
it's
know
such
what
a
it
bizarre
is.
story. There's so many like details that feel off subject, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's weird because there's a. Let me see. Let me see if I can look up that name. Did you find anything on the name Isern?
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Huh.
I was just taking notes.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Um,
Doesn't it say anything?
Nah, not that I see anyway. Not right away. Yeah, it's weird. It starts out and it says something about like he a lot of people think he's a miser.
Yeah,
I like
and apparently he's not in. Was Do you think he was lying about having the gold back at the house?
yeah, it doesn't say, does it?
But and he
Yeah,
never, even when he says people say I'm a miser, but then he asks the question, but how much gold could a woodcutter have? It's like he doesn't say he's not. Like they're deceived.
yeah. And
He's
is a
kind of
miser
cagey.
really uh having a lot of stuff, or is it just kind of having an evil eye?
That's true, a
Oh,
miser. But it seems like he thinks that the implication from the townsfolks when they rumor that about him is that he has a lot of material gains. And then he asks the question, but how much could I actually have if I just appear cutting wood? Um, I think when you told the story of Odin plugging out his eye the other day, it zapped that back to my memory. But on hearing it again, I don't think so. I remember
well,
the running theory I had before was that it was eternity, that the disc was eternity. But I don't really have any reason to think that either. No,
I could maybe. I mean, maybe it could work that. I don't know
or
because it
eternal
seems like
life.
it's when you brought it up before. Because I was like, maybe it is a disc. Because when we were talking about different ways of seeing, uh, Craig kept saying disc, like you have disc, and it's almost like a lens you're looking through, or a disc you're looking through. And so when you brought it up before, and you brought up the when I mentioned the eye of the goat and it being flat, just when you said flat, I was thinking this disc only has one side. Like maybe it's just seeing through like a material perspective, but then maybe it's flipped like you're talking about, and it's seeing with an eternal perspective.
Yeah, what threw me off is when he said there's nothing like it in the whole world that only has one side. I was like, well, if
He
it's an
has
eye,
one
you know,
side.
he's like, this is the
Interesting.
only thing. That's why maybe I thought it was more in line with like eternity, like because eternal life, uh, like right now, is invisible to us, and so maybe it's just life. Life has one. Like when it has one side, it has one material side that you can account for, and then the other side is invisible and non-material. So like this disc only has one side.
It's only an eternal perspective or something. It's
And
weird.
that's why he speaks for Odin because I don't know.
It might. I mean, it might be. It's weird because I feel like when you try to grab it, it like eludes you or something.
Yeah,
It's like
the story itself is the disc.
yeah, it's weird because the guy shows up and he's got a scar across his face. You almost think, oh, it's Odin. It's got to be Odin. But then you're like, I don't know. But then Yeah, I don't know. That's
He
really strange.
identifies himself inexplicably.
It's certain, yeah. Which sounds familiar to me. Why does that sound so familiar?
Seems like a name we would know.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's his big play. Is he's the stranger. We're the workaday woodcutter reading his story. Now its meaning eludes us like the disc eludes him. We hate the author to this day.
I know. Well, the one thing he says that kind of reminds me, which kind of ties in your idea about like eternity or at least an eternal perspective, is there's a, it's, of course, it's the George MacDonald story about the golden key. And he's talking about the golden key and he's like, what is the golden key? He's asking his aunt because she's like, I think your father found it one day. It sits at the end of the rainbow, and he's asking her about it. And she says something, and he said maybe if I find it, I could sell it for a lot of money. And she said, you better never to find it and sell it. Uh,
Hmm.
and in George
That's like
Mc,
eternal life, right?
yeah,
Like
and
it's the treasure in the field.
yeah, yeah. And I think in George MacDonald's story, if I could pinpoint it to anything, which I don't think he wants you to do, and I don't think you're supposed to do, but if I could, I think it would be something like the imagination. Um, and like the proper form of imagination, not just like any willy-nilly thing, but like because he finds it at the end of a rainbow, and so the rainbow is like all the multiplicity, all the colors, but there that like goes upwards, it like has an arc. So I think it's something like I think that's which would be something uh, like an eternal perspective. It's kind of like it's not material things. It's like uh, what's all in the heavens, sort of.
What what do you imagination is?
Yeah, did you ever read George MacDonald's like article on imagination? It's
Hmm.
called the reason I think that it's because he titles it the Golden Key, but that's what it's titled online, and it's all about
Hmm.
the imagination. And it was probably one of the hardest things I think I've ever read because he's not an easy guy to read, especially when he starts getting into like theology and his like unspoken sermons. They're not. I find C.S. Lewis is kind of the same way. Like it's very I don't know if it's wordy. I don't know what it is. I have to read them very slow. But this article, it's called The Golden Key, and it's about the imagination. And that's when he talks about like poetry versus prose and things like that. Like even with words are basically an attempt to frame a thought. Like
Hmm.
and he says, but then the overuse of those words eventually be like if so when you first do that, it's like a form of poetry, but then the overuse of the words they just become prose and they kind of deaden and harden. um and then I can't remember the exact. I'd have to look it up again. It's a really really profound like I don't know if it's not I wouldn't call it an article. Let me see, I think I got it bookmarked.
Like an essay about the
Oh,
imagination.
essay, that's be the right word,
But it
yeah.
sounds like it is a narrative cooked into it.
um Let me see here if I can find it. The imagination, right here, I got it bookmarked. um Yeah, I'll just drop it in the chat or something. Uh,
Well, how are you tying it to the disc?
well, because in the beginning of this is the essay, and it talks about the imagination kind of being the golden key. Um, and then in George MacDonald's fantasy story called The Golden Key, a young child is looking for the golden key,
Oh,
and his aunt tells him, and he says maybe if he finds it, he could sell it. So I think it's
see,
something
yeah,
like because when
yeah, yeah.
in this fantasy story, when he finds the golden key, and then he's got to find where the key comes from. And so they're basically walking through this land, and they go through this place, and it's basically this big, like it's just this big stretch of land they're walking through, and it's kind of like I don't know if it's a desert. I can't really remember how it describes it, but they see all these shadows, and so they're trying to find the place from where the shadows fall. And he's wondering if the key could unlock that place. And it's kind of I think the idea is like right now in this material realm, as we kind of live in a land of shadows, because in the real, the true is like in the heavenly realm. and everything in the material realm is kind of a representation of the heavenly idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense, but the only way that I'm able to tie it back to the disc story is that they both want to sell the thing they shouldn't want to sell.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I was just saying, like, if the disc is a lens which to see the heavenlies, which to see the eternal, it's like you're willing to sell that for a material piece of gold.
Is that like the imagination, the
Yeah, you could.
lens through which you see the heavenly?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
You could say
earlier
that.
you were trying to say, I don't mean like willy nilly imagination.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what? How do you distinguish? Because when I
George.
think of imagination, I'm thinking about conjuring up just worlds that don't exist.
Yeah, so this is like I hadn't heard it described. I literally was listening to a Grail Country podcast today or YouTube, and I thought they did. Uh, I think his name was Jed or something that was on there, but I thought he described it perfectly. Um, he said that the imagination through the crucifix. So it's like when everything is kind of directed through the Christ pattern or something. The imagination is you take the pattern of Christ or self-sacrificial love and you push imagination through that and follow it to its whatever end it wants to go to. And so and I'm not describing it right. He described it so much better. George McDonald's makes a distinction between the words he uses are imagination and fancy. And he says it's not fancy is wrong, imagination is right. So it's not like just whatever you conjure up to your own pleasures
It
or
has to have
desires.
a Christological framework.
I don't know that it has to like consciously be Christian, but it does have to have that framework, I think, of the pattern of Christ, of the pattern of um
Self-sacrifice. Do you
yeah,
think it's
self-sacrificial love.
reductive to, or do you think that when we talk about Christ and sum him up in self-sacrifice, that it's reductive or no?
How so? How do you mean?
Well, I was just thinking about there's like it doesn't have to be Christian necessarily or of Christ, except insofar as it has to do with self-sacrifice.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know that it necessarily has to be, if I'm talking about imagination, I don't know that it has to be maybe even necessarily self-sacrificial, but at least redemptive in nature, maybe. A redemptive form of imagination. I'm not really sure. I'm talking like way out of my league here, so I haven't thought about it enough. I wish we had like Nate Heil, I know can explain this better, and that other guy, that because they were talking about it, and I thought they described it really well. But I don't know. Sorry to get to your main question. I don't know if it's um I think it probably is reductive because I think it's very important that the self-sacrificial love that we say is the nature of God that kind of creates all things, that all things are created through. I think it's important that that was um that became man, like the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So I think to say, oh, like don't think about Christ or whatever, then like it's just about self-sacrificial love. I think maybe you're missing something. We'd be missing something if we did that. But I think as for storytelling, it seems like lots of
It's the
storytelling,
main thrust.
yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to even have a mention of Christ to reflect that pattern or
Hmm.
something. And you still get that message even uh without specifically mentioning Christ or whatever. I'm wondering if Esther does that. Does Esther do that as well? Because Esther doesn't even mention God.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's so wild because when I think about it, I don't feel that absence. It's it doesn't stand out even when I read it mm, with that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. You know what
If
though? Sorry, go ahead.
It just feels very much like the subtext of it is totally there. But you know what though? What?
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm wondering if even with the imagination though, if it has to always take that like the crucifix pattern or whatever however the way they worded it.
Well,
Because I'm thinking about fairy tales now, and a lot of times they just feel uh a bit, I don't want to say arbitrary, but I think the word Peugeot used was ambiguous or something. They're just like, the morality of of a fairy story feels a bit vague. And he said, uh, I think when Peugeot said it, I thought he said something like,
the
because
morality of it feels a little bit.
yeah, you don't always get a moral story from a
Mm.
fairy tale. Like it always seems like just sometimes it just leaves you with a strange feeling.
Hmm. You know what you're making me think of? I'm trying to wrap my tiny brain around what what you mean when you're saying imagination, because what I guess I'm hearing is you saying it's not imagining. When I talk about imagination as a virtue of sorts, then I'm not talking about imagining anything you want. I'm talking
Hmm.
about imagining with a very clear aim, and that aim itself being virtuous.
That's a good way of putting it. Imagination is a virtue. I think that's probably the proper way to phrase it.
Well, I'd have to know what was virtuous about it, and I'm wondering if you have an idea. If the imagination, like if I was imagining towards a positive end, uh, then the imagination still wouldn't be a virtue; it would just be virtuous imagining. So if imagination is a virtue, why? To me, it seems pretty neutral.
But you need it for creation, right? Or if you're creating something new, I guess. Or maybe you're not creating something new.
Um, yeah, I'm really thinking of imagination as very externalized, but if imagination could somehow be like a state of being, then it could be a means by which you are imaging your creator.
Yeah, I think
I'm
like almost like a
struggling.
revelation as well. I don't know. I don't. Um, it seems necessary for hope, for things like hope. Um,
Yeah, because hope isn't something that is, it's something that might be. And so you have to image it from
mm,
nowhere. You have to conjure it. Is that what you mean?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it's very tied up in hope and in faith.
It
It's something
reminds, yeah, and
that
in
isn't
faith.
now, but that you have to somehow make real for you in the present. And so you imagine it as a means to, as you imagine as a means to faith.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting thinking about because then, like, guys, it's just such a powerful force. Because I understand how we're talking about it right now, but then I'm also thinking about all these other stories that I mean, I would assume come from through some form of imagination that are like fairy stories, or even the story about the disc. And it's like, what is its what is its aim in that? What is it trying to get at? And it almost feels like a warning or like don't be like this man. Uh,
Yeah,
And
some kind of parable.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What? Well, you really threw me off my horse when you brought up imagination. I wouldn't have even thought to bring that up. And it's not something that I have a clear kind of, well, the category that I have for imagination, you sort of disrupted from the beginning, because when
Uh,
you said it, it wasn't just willy nilly imagination, and then yeah, I guess I was just thinking of imagination as I think maybe I was discounting imagination a little bit. Yeah. Wasn't
Yeah,
reviewing it in the way that you were.
yeah, I definitely used to do that. I used to do the same thing with dreams too, though, and I think they're all kind of interrelated, and because it's like a realm of images, and I think that's where, and it's a realm of like the heavens almost, because it's um because in your imagination, I mean, images in that word, but it's also like, it's in the heavens. It's not tangible. It's like there's
So maybe
something.
it's broadcasting like the subconscious of your soul a little bit. It, and I'm just trying to elevate it in the way that you have it elevated, because if I think of imagination, I usually think of it as something that I've generated in and of myself, and and maybe I shouldn't denigrate that either. But I'm thinking, well, that can't be the heavens. That's just something that I made up. That's what the heavens would be if I were God, which I'm not. But there's a part of I made in the image of God, so there could be this sort of subconscious broadcasting of that piece of him
Yeah,
that comes
yeah.
up in dreams and imagination.
Well, there's probably some internal from your subconscious as well as from the outer, like external, that you pull from. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but like you have to have imagination, or you couldn't even think of heaven, right? In a sense.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you get some descriptions of it, but they're abstract and not very much many. I've got a question because I was saying I hadn't at least consciously recently been holding imagination in high esteem, and you said, well, you used to be like that. But when I was thinking back on my life, I used to hold imagination in higher esteem, and now I do less. Did you
Really?
have a moment where you held it in high esteem and then you sort of moved away from that and discounted it and then came back to a point of 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 revering it, or we're just on opposite sides of the coin?
I don't remember
Because
ever
I
holding it
think
to a
about
high esteem.
when you were a kid, did you like make believe and come up with stories and feel the thrill of imagination?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I can maybe think of a few stories, but I don't know that it was ever like
That's the
I
willy
don't
nilly kind, maybe.
yeah, it was always treated as that. Yeah.
Well,
Like I mean, even like when kids imagine monsters under their beds or something, like the most maybe I think I don't think I personally experienced this, but most I think growing up, maybe Natalie would have experienced like, oh, it's the demonic. Like maybe the parent my parents would have
huh.
told her, oh, it's the demonic, which is probably like close enough to taking it seriously, I guess. But
But you weren't considering that something born of the imagination, but something that was being presented to you objectively. Like, oh, I'm having this fear. My parents have told me that it's something demonic, so I'm experiencing a demon objectively rather than conjuring it up. That's how you would have understood it if you were told that. Yeah.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, but I don't think I personally encountered that very much. I don't think we really talked about it much. I don't remember, and I guess maybe just like I don't think me and my parents really talked about stuff like that. So I would assume it was maybe just culture, just somehow seeing everything so materialistically. Like even which I guess would have to somehow come through faith.
Amen.
It's very strange because I don't know where I would even because I was homeschooled, it's not like I went to school. And so it's like the form of Christianity I grew up in, though for all the miracles they believed in, how Protestant it is, somehow still held this materialistic viewpoint or something. Or and I think it and I think it even the reading of scriptures seemed to come across that way. Like we were getting at in our last conversation with Craig, it seems like a lot of times they're interpreted just very literal and very historical. And then even the miracles are very, very literal and very historical. So the parting of the Red Sea is the parting of the Red Sea, and it's not parabolic either. Like it's not, which I would think it's both, but it's like it's actually to say it's also parabolic and it's also symbolic was like to deny the historicity of it or something. So you couldn't have both, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, what's interesting about that is we're talking about how we imagine something as a means to, as a mechanism for faith and hope, because
Mm.
there's something in the future that we don't have, and so we have to conjure it. But the same is also true of the past, because when we hear about the miracles, we've never seen anything like that, and so we have to have an imagination to appreciate history as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You're really making me revere imagination again. But
Yeah, it's definitely like I think it should be it's really interesting too. I think it should be like a holy thing. Um and I think when it is holy is when it is proper, if that makes any sense to say that. When it's not tainted by your own desires and your own.
yeah, yeah, I didn't hear your friend on or the speaker on Grail Country, but when you said imagination, like going through the prism of the crucifix, or
Yeah, they said they've worded it that way and phrased it that way. I've always seen it, and maybe this is just kind of some of George McDonald's doing, and also probably that movie Annihilation, as I've always kind of seen it as like the rainbow,
it's
um,
funny.
because it's like I don't know. So, well, anyways, just to get back to try to finish up that thought, like I don't know when I basically had no, it considered dreams and imagination just nothing. Like it was just whatever. But then now I kind of, yeah, then there was a point, and there literally was probably like 2 years ago where it just flipped, and uh, I was like, okay, wait, there's something more going on. And I think it started when I started revering dreams more, and I'm like, okay, wait, no, this, when you start thinking about consciousness, then it gets really, really real, very, very fast, because you're like, I'm not in my bed when I sleep. I'm wherever my dreams are, because I don't, and it's very real in that way because even if you are physically sleeping in your bed, you don't remember any of that. Like you're off in your dream, and then that dream has effect on your reality the next day, or it can. Um, so then I started taking it more seriously, and then I started even taking the imagination more seriously. And that was probably when was that? That was not this past year. Actually, it was the year beginning of what's this year? I think it was the beginning of 2021. And I remember praying to God that I wanted him to speak to me through my imagination. And that was
Wow.
my specific prayer to him. And then I remember that verse kept coming to me. And it's just this weird part in Galatians where it says, I would have plucked out my own eyes and given them to you. And it's kind of the same thing with Odin. Like, and I didn't even connect those at the time. But it was, I
What
remember
is that? Plucked out my own eyes and given them to you?
there's this weird part in Galatians, and he says, "For I," it's when Paul's talking to the Galatians. He says, "For I bear you witness that something like you would have plucked out your own eyes and given them to me." And so, like the way I was interpreting it was totally out of context, but it was like it was in the form of a prayer, like God, I want you to speak to me through my imagination. If that means me plucking out my physical eyes, then I will do it. And I was so serious at the time, like I literally would have done it. And I think a little bit of it was like maybe kind of some sort of apathetic despair as well I was going through, where it was like I'm just I just want the like I need it. I need the imagination because uh this life's currently gotten stale or something. Probably some weird, I can't describe it, but so then
Did you have
anyways,
imaginary friends when you were a kid?
I don't think so. Not that I remember. Did you?
You didn't run around playing games like sword fighting and stuff. Like you didn't like play make believe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I really don't remember a whole lot. Uh
You know, man,
I'm sure I did.
I this is killing me because when I was a kid, I every it was just so entirely uh real to me, like
You built your castles in the sky.
just well, I remember like specifically like a moment when like I realized I didn't have access to that kind of unmitigated imagination anymore. And even if I sat down and tried and like made an effort, because the facts were anyway that I didn't have to make an effort as a kid. It was just this constant like conjuring of worlds and things that weren't.
Yeah, which makes you think it's not arbitrary too, because like if it's a hard thing to do, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not easy. It's not easy to engage in. Like if I try to sit here and image something or imagine something in my head, like it's not easy. It's almost like it's almost like a communion you have to get into with it or something. Like where you're kind of receiving it or something. Because I can't just conjure it up like I could when I was a kid or anything.
So what was the answer to your prayer, man, when you prayed then?
That's when I went on that because I usually try to do a fast beginning of every year. So it was at that same time, and that's when I started, like I had mentioned before, all the weird stuff with the moon, and then it got, uh, and that's when I started seeing the the moonlight, like seeing by the moonlight, and so not you're seeing by subconscious, you're seeing by the dream world because the moon's out at night, so that's the dream time when you should be asleep um and when things are not clearly defined because the sun and conscious thought and conscious thinking is like clear thought and clearly defined and things by the moon is like when uh things are more yeah by the moonlight like the shadows aren't as harsh things aren't as defined as clearly and um there's a lot more you can pull out of the darkness, you know, there's a lot like more potential there or something. It's very strange, but that's when all that happened, and I started like I mentioned you before, it was like I would sit out and just I had this weird sort of fascination with the moon, and was just I didn't even know what any of it was. I didn't know that. Um, I don't know. It was just, but it was not necessarily just fascination. It was almost like this weird communion, where not like the physical moon, but kind of everything that it symbolizes, like moonlight, silver, all those things. Which it literally felt like a door opened up and I was able to engage in imagination more. But then with that door came a lot of other weird like fancies almost, you know. It was kind of twofold. It was not 100% enjoyable experience. It was like here's this uh if you're gonna open the door, that's what I guess I mean when I say if it's the imagination has to be holy, I think, for it to be proper. Like it has to be virgin. Um, because you can get into all your fancies and all your selfish desires when that door kind of opens back up. Like at the same time, all of a sudden I had some weird desire to look at pornography again or something. And I had the desire to like just engage in these weird fleshy pleasures that hadn't really been there for a while. And it was like uh because my imagination would kind of want to wander there. So I can't really describe it right. It was this,
It reminds me of Solomon, man, because it's like when he asked for wisdom, and the Lord was like, "You didn't ask for riches or glory," but then he ended up using the wisdom to get riches and glory. You know.
yeah, yeah. The way I described it, and it was sounded. It's hard for me to talk about because it gets in like the weird the easiest way for me. Like I was trying to find ways to talk about it, and the easiest way I knew how to talk about it was in some weird poetic language. But it was like I wrote something down at one point, and I was like, I prayed to God that He would give me that He'd speak to me through imagination, and He gave me the moon. Um, but then it was something like but and He opened a door but I don't know, it's something about the moon, but then it said, but with it came all these dancing harlots or something like that. Like it was like this, like kind of like Solomon and all his concubines. It was like you have all this because the moon is femininity, right? So it's potentiality. It's like uh it's that's what darkness is too. Like there's all this potential there you can pull out of this infinite space of imagination. But then with that is all these like harlots and all this bad stuff you can fall into too if you're not careful. Um so it's I don't know. I don't even know necessarily what I'm getting at. I'm not sure. And it can be scary too, I guess, because if you open up uh if you open up just a realm of imagination, then it's almost like this realm of infinite potential. Like if you're gonna open that door, right? But if it's like pure imagination, directed imagination, then it's right, because that's kind of even what the annihilation is, right? It's this what is it in that movie? It's the shimmer. So it's
Mhm.
like the rainbow, everything's, but it's all like potentiality, and then everything's like all the colors are like mixing, all the names are mixing, all the forms are mixing, all the different creatures are mixing together, and it's like all all the colors of the rainbow, all the potentiality, all the material world is like trying to find a telos, is trying to find a head, it's trying to find a name
Mhm.
type thing.
There's no identity anymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you run into that like kind of almost scary aspect of it, but then yeah, hey Craig. But then
I
so that's when I started, I think I was seeing it as like the rainbow, because it's just the rainbow kind of symbolizes like every color of the spectrum, all the potentiality, all the different um ideas. But then within the scriptures, the rainbow is set in the cloud. It's set like in the heavens, veiled in a sense, up in the heavens, and it's also surrounds God's throne. And then it says, where you see it, um, it says David's virgin daughters wore robes of many colors.
Doesn't it say that about Christ himself?
That he wore a robe of many colors.
Yeah.
I don't know if Christ. I don't know. Maybe it says it about Joseph, and
Yeah,
it
I
says it
maybe
about
made it up in my head.
Tamar. And then whenever Amnon rapes her, then she tears her robe. But then it's got this weird line. It says David's virgin daughters wore robes of many colors. And then I think in one of the Psalms, I think it's 45 or something, it talks about the queen being uh, clothed in a robe of many colors as well, or something like that.
Wow.
Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting at with all that, but I feel like
Maybe, oh, here it is. It's Revelation 4, right? And he sat there, who
you're
sat there had
right.
the appearance of Jasper and Cornelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. I guess he wasn't wearing it.
Yep. So I don't know. I feel like I just ramble and I never make any sense.
Well, man, there's just too much there for us to go here.
Yeah.
It's not our fault. We started with the disc, but
Have
we can
you
pivot. And
have you read the disc story, Craig? It's I'll send it to you. It's very short,
it's a
but
2-minute story.
or you
It's
could just listen to this, because I read through the whole thing. But me and Mitch have been baffled by it for quite a while now, and we're trying to make sense of it. And I don't know that we really got anywhere, but
when you read it, recite it to your friends. It's a great party trick.
Mitch says it makes him mad.
It's like they think it's going to be a joke or like a fable that has a clear meaning, and then it's the disc. But we
So
can
anyway,
do JV.
yeah, let's pivot here and talk about that.
yeah, I thought you were gonna
JP.
recite the disc story.
I mean, I can do it again if you want.
Well,
Did you already
I
do it
can
on
give
this
you the
call?
summary. I can give you the summary version of it.
Break it down, Mitch. Do it.
I,
If you've already talked about this, you don't have to do it just for me.
this
Yeah.
is the 90-second version. There's a woodcutter, and he cuts wood in the woods with his brother, and his brother eventually dies, despite them having made a commitment that they were going to live out there in the woods and just cut wood until they laid out every tree. And he fishes in the creek with his hands, and he's getting old and he can kind of barely see. And everybody down in the town says he's a miser, but he says, how much money could a woodcutter make? And then one day a tall elderly man shows up with a scar on his face, and he's leaning on his walking stick trying to walk. Clearly a very old guy. He refers to England as Saxony. They share a meal of bread and fish. He lays out some animal skins for him to sleep on that night in the same place that his brother died. And at dawn, they wake up, the rain has stopped, there's a light snow on the ground. The man throws his stick down and he says to the woodcutter, pick that up. And the guy says, why should I pick it up? And he says, because I'm a king. And so he picks up the stick and hands it to him. And suddenly his voice has changed and he says, I'm in the line of Odin. And the guy says, oh, I don't worship Odin, I worship Christ. And he said, he just basically doesn't even hear what he says. I've led many men to victory in combat. And what's more, I have the disc of Odin. And you can tell it's his disc because it's only visible on one side. It's the only thing in the world that only has one side. And he holds out his hand, which the woodcutter realizes had been closed all along. And he says, you can touch it if you want. And the guy's like, I don't know. He sees a little gleam, but he's like, I don't know. There's really nothing there. But when he reaches out and touches it, he feels something cold. You're like, oh, there's a disc there. He says, well, I'd like to have it. I tell you what, I've got a bunch of gold at the house, and I will trade you the gold for this disc. And the guy says, no. And he says, well, in that case, you can go on your way. And when the guy turns around, the woodcutter axes him. And when he axes him, the disc falls out of his hand. Well, he drags the guy to the river to dispose of the body. Floats down river, problem solved. He goes back to the disc, but it's only got one side. He can't find it. And he's still looking for it to this day, hating the guy who had Odin's disc.
Wow.
So good luck on that one.
That was an amazing retelling of that story, man.
Well,
You
I had
covered,
some
like,
notes pulled up, so.
oh, okay.
What was the point of the brother dying?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many times where the story's going along and he'll be like, by the way, and the by the way just completely throws you off.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like arbitrary that he does that. Like, it feels like
Yeah, I
it's
mean, nothing's arbitrary in like a 500-word story.
yeah. It's very strange. I don't
Maybe
know.
it's just a bad man. Maybe it's just a badly written story.
It's just George McDonald all over again.
Yeah.
This guy can't write to save his life.
And so since we've done that one, you guys should also read Blue Tigers by the same guy. I like that one a lot better, actually. But I don't know. That one might be easier to figure out.
South American author?
Yeah, Jorge Borges or something
Jorge
like that.
Luis Borges.
Yeah, something like that.
Is this a real author? Is this just somebody on Tumblr? Who are we talking about?
No, it's a real guy. It's a real guy. John Bell said he read the Blue Tigers one. I think he might have also read the disc. Christian Golden read the disc, though. I remember he read it.
I believe
well.
I believe it's a real person. I just want to know what their viewership is like outside of us.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think they have some sand.
What else
But
did he
yeah,
write?
you go tell this to your friends, like set it up different every time, just really spruce it up.
I'm not gonna be a part of this. You keep this to yourself.
Fine. One day you'll get it. Well, the reason that it got brought up again kind of was because when Jason started talking about Odin plucking out his eye, I was like, well, maybe the eye is the disc, but it didn't hold any water when we checked it out.
Yeah, so that's how this conversation started. Then it led over to the imagination, and I was like, maybe imagination is the disc. Maybe it's we don't know.
It's your imagination, our eternal life, or the story itself is the disc that we can never find.
It only has one side.
But I came onto this. I was telling Jason that I didn't really have a lot of insight on the video. I just couldn't resist hopping on the line since I was free.
We should just do it a different time. I feel like maybe we should just try to gather our wits and find something.
Well, in that case, do you guys want to recount the conversation that you're having back and forth on text? Because I was doing other things and got a little lost in the shuffle.
Man.
I don't know. We can. You have questions, objections? I want to hear them for sure. My theology, philosophy, whatever it is, how I conceptualize the world.
It sounds like this is something you said today, and I've heard you say similar things. It's not, well, tell me if you think this is fair. There are certain traits That's it. There's certain abstract things, like we were talking about sportsmanship. You would say this thing needs to be embedded inside of this other thing. Otherwise, something bad happens. Otherwise, it dissolves. Otherwise, it degenerates.
Yeah.
Could you say more about why this is? Because I can imagine that that might be true, but I don't know why I should believe that that's true or why it's necessary.
Um, I'll try to say it again because I'm trying to. I thought the sportsmanship one was the struggle for me, and that's why I was like, man, I hope I'm not like twisting the idea to make it fit within my idea of how I perceive things. So the reason I say this thing, whatever it is, should be basically, I'll say it should be wrapped in forgiveness or seated on a throne of mercy, or however you want to say it, in a womb of compassion, like however you want to get at it. The imagery, like I could go with all sorts of imagery, like Christ sitting on Mary's lap, the mercy seat, God sitting on the mercy seat, all those things. And so it could be, to me, this is like essential for life because when you think of God, like God's just a word. So I've kind of had this discussion before, and I think anytime we aim at God to discover Him, I think it's necessary in order to relate to Him. But I think we're ultimately, I guess, we're kind of pulling at a finite aspect of Him. So you could argue that we're almost pulling at an idol in a way, but we don't have another choice because it's like, how are you going to know God unless you attempt to name Him, right? And you're naming like the infinite. So it's saying, like, if you said, even God will name Himself sometimes. It's like, I am the Lord who heals you. Like, so He's the God who heals, or I am. What is the one you quoted the other day? Jehovah Shalom or something. The God, the Lord is peace. So you could say peace is the highest ideal, right? So then peace is the telos, it's the aim, it's the goal, it's the game you're playing. It's like, I need to acquire peace, I need to become peaceful, I need to establish peace in the world. And it's like, if peace is the most high that you're aiming towards, the highest thing on your value, like your hierarchy value or whatever, it has to be sitting on the mercy seat. Otherwise it's going to judge you because you're not you're never going to be all peaceful, like, or even if you become that close to being all peaceful, it's like you're within your imagination or whatever, within your mind, you can still picture something higher, like there's still an aim, like you're never, like there's going to be more peace to aim at. So in that sense, it's always above you and it's always judging you, it's always damning you, because you're never going to live up to it. But then even the more you do live up to it, then you yourself could slip into, if it's not, if the ideal, the most high, is not like either sitting on the mercy seat, married to mercy, married to forgiveness, whatever you want to call it, it's like it's gonna damn you. And then, or if you get to it or get closer to it, you'll start to damn others because you'll be like, this person's not as peaceful as me. This person's not, and it doesn't even have to be as peaceful as you. You could do it in the name of like saying you're being loving, like, oh, this person's not peaceful and they're causing destruction in the world. So let's damn them, which, like, I understand there is a casting out or something, there is like when someone is like, because we got into a whole idea of like penalties, there is a missing the mark, like a forgiveness that applies to just missing the mark. And but then there's also the forgiveness that applies to like rebellion, but then that in turn needs repentance. But anyway, so I guess what I'm getting at is like, that's just how everything kind of maps out for me, um with any ideal. So even sportsmanship, if it's like the highest ideal, any virtue you want to put up there has to be like has to be accompanied with forgiveness or seated on a throne of mercy, or, and I think Jordan Peterson says truth nestled within love. So I think that's kind of another way of saying the same thing.
Does this have to do with the virtues have to be nested in other virtues? Or would you say something different?
I would say the virtues, any virtue, has to be nested within mercy or forgiveness,
Would you
something like
would
that.
you say are mercy and forgiveness, are they virtues themselves?
Yeah, yeah, you could say that. So even forgiveness has to be nested within forgiveness because it's like I'm never going to be the most forgiving. Like I'm going to need forgiveness too. It's this
Mm,
uh if forgiveness, if being the most forgiving creature that ever existed, it's like
mm,
I'm still going to fall short of that. So I'm still going to need the ideal forgiveness somehow seated on a throne of mercy or seated in forgiveness. Otherwise I can't ever touch it. I can't ever reach it. And it's uh to me that's what Christ embodies is if Christ is God's forgiveness. And so it's like that's why forgiveness is a thing that connects the highest to the lowest. It'll and it refuses to let go too. It's relentless in that way. um
it
like it
sounds like keep going.
no I was just gonna it doesn't excuse um it doesn't necessarily excuse the fault or the transgression or anything, but it's still relentless in that it doesn't let go. Like it almost that's I said it the other day. I said something like it almost like demands repentance and then offers forgiveness or something like that.
Mm,
It's but it still holds on. Like it's to me that's why I think that's how I perceive the Holy Trinity is because I'm like and it's a pattern of unity of all things. Because I think any any pattern of unity has to has to be like almost founded on that foundation of forgiveness or it's eventually gonna fracture and fall apart because to me that's the one and this was the idea I wanted to explore because to me that's the one that doesn't dissolve and it doesn't break because that's the one unity that will relentlessly hold on no matter
which
what.
would just to
Forget
clarify, forgiveness is the unity that won't dissolve.
Yeah, yeah, to me, but I'd like to explore this more because I haven't really thought about that. But you brought that up that there might be more that don't.
Oh, I don't know. I wonder, can forgiveness, can you have an excess of forgiveness? Let's
Have a
say, like too much, can you have too much forgiveness so that you might say maybe forgiveness needs to be wrapped in something else or tempered by something else. So maybe if I forgive someone so much that that it allows them to take advantage of me and others, let's say.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, that definitely happens in life. The way I think, see, this is what's hard for me is I think the way I like conceptualize forgiveness is maybe a little bit different than most people. And
Mm,
my mom said the same thing to me recently, but I think because I was trying to explain the same idea to her right before I went to India. But
mm,
she said, I think maybe the way you perceive of forgiveness is different than a lot of people. I definitely don't perceive of it as flattery or just saying like, oh, you're okay. Or, like, because if you said to someone, oh, that's okay. Or don't worry about it. Um, that's different than saying, I forgive you. Like if you went to someone and said, I forgive you, there's a good chance they're going to get offended at you, especially if they don't think they need forgiveness. So like if someone could say that to me and I would get offended too, especially when I think I'm right and I don't think I need forgiveness. Like when I'm self-righteous, then forgiveness is extremely offensive. Uh,
mm,
because I don't need it. Like if I had a like anything in my lifestyle or anything I think I'm finding my identity in. Um the one example that came to my head that's gonna be offend some people is like if if so say like you're Christian and I'm a homosexual or something, and then I tell you I'm a homosexual and you say, I forgive you. It's like I would get offended if I don't see the error that you're telling because you're clearly you're responding if you said it's okay or don't or like or I mean
uh,
it's still I guess be offended because it'd be like I think this is part of who I am and I don't see why like where there's any fault so like I don't think I need forgiveness so it's like I would reject the forgiveness in that way. So to me, I think in that way, forgiveness is offensive, and it's not really a form of flattery, because it almost, just the action of Christ being on the cross, him being God's forgiveness, is offensive, because it says, humanity, you missed the mark, and now this is, and like here, like it tells you there was a truth, there was a goal, there was an aim, you missed it, and now you need this to pull you back to connection with the ideal.
I see how I see how that relates to what you just said before.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So does that make sense? Like it's like it kind of does that with forgiveness. I think does that with any ideal, because it's like you'll never really necessarily reach any. Even like I've been thinking even about brotherhood. It's like if there's not, even if you're, I guess you could say physical brothers, but if you had like a brotherhood of like a gang or a sports, or even sports or anything, like if
Like
you're,
our brotherhood.
yeah, right now, yeah, or any even like friendship, yeah, like friendship, there has to be some allowance of forgiveness because we differ from one another. So like there's gonna be times when we don't agree, or there's gonna be times when like maybe I'll say something offensive, and it's like I will need your guys' forgiveness, otherwise you'll cancel me, and then there's no more relationship, and there's no more connection, and so there's no more like me, Craig, and whatever the friendship that was holding us together, that can be broken if there's not forgiveness that can like pull it back together.
Hmm. What's on your mind, Mitch?
Well, I'm starting to understand better uh, this hierarchy of games, and that if you're playing one game, a certain game, uh, to be playing that game, you have to have played the game before. And so that's what you mean by it's nested in that, right?
You have to have played a game before. Could you use an example?
Well, I if I'm playing the game of if I'm playing an actual game, uh, then I've then that game is nested in the the sportsmanship values, or the playing by the rules value, or the honesty value.
Hmm.
Okay, or the very higher end, which you guys have been using, was if I'm playing the forgiveness game, I was already playing the truth game, because um, what am I forgiving? I'm forgiving to this according to this standard.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I understand the hierarchy of games. That you can only be playing some games if you're playing another game already. But as an addendum, it's it's not always in a total stack. So within the forgiveness game, I can be playing several games, or more
Hmm.
horizontally. Um, so not every game I play is backed on the game before it.
Hmm. This is interesting. It seems like maybe we're not. I'm not sure that forgiveness is a game or truth is a game.
So you would refer to games as the things that we play to view truth.
Not well, not to the game is the telos. The game, for example, uh, if I got hungry right now and I had to go to my refrigerator to get some food, that would be a game. I'm walking through my home, navigating through walls. I'm moving my feet. So walking is a game that I learned when I was a child, right? I'm opening doors. I'm using my hands to grasp things. These are all games that I have to have mastered to feed myself.
Okay.
So when I say games, I mean
The things we do to live well.
anytime you have a goal, you're playing a game.
Okay.
The telos is a game. I could see why yeah, I could, and I mean, I'm not set on saying forgiveness is a game or even truth is a game. I mean, I guess if you put it in the form of there's one, if you were trying to say there's one truth that we're all aiming towards, then you could say maybe that's a game because we're all aiming towards it, and it's like a telos. But I guess where I would say is like it seems like forgiveness is something that has to exist before the game can even be started, sort of. Like it has to
Okay.
So
it
forgiveness
has
is something that the
it
game
like
that has to.
yeah, it has to be like the foundational element. Otherwise, you don't um otherwise you when you fail, I guess you don't have to fail the game. But so if you fail, if you miss the mark, then you need forgiveness or some sort of mercy, some sort of flexibility, you know, to call you back to that aim. Because it's otherwise it's game over immediately, you know. Even if you miss the
Okay.
mark, even if it's not a willful rebellion or like because we were talking about sports games and how there's penalty box even, so there's actual like purposely breaking of the rules versus missing the mark. So you have a missing the mark, but you still need like a mercy or a measure of forgiveness. Otherwise, it's game over. Like in you, it's hard to use it like sports analogies where you're like kicking a goal or something, but it works for like I mean like video games or something. Like you your character dies, but then you get an extra life or something. It's like you miss the mark. But then in sports games, you have like the breaking of the rules, and it's like that's when there's like the penalty box or something, like someone who's actively destroying the game or actively like then you put them outside, like then they're cast out
Yeah.
in a sense, but they're still they can still come back in through forgiveness or something, and they can still get back in the game and go towards the highest goal.
I'm totally losing myself in the metaphors here. But
Sorry.
okay, so the other day we were talking about how to interpret scripture, and that was the telos. And you were suggesting that there are several different games that you play to reach that goal of interpreting scripture. Is that right?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I wasn't thinking about the games directly in that sense. Although you are playing different games, it's or the way I'd put it, if in that situation is there's one game which is you're trying to draw meaning out of this text that you're observing, and there's different. It's more like there's different strategies.
Mhm.
You have to do a strategy switching.
Oh,
You see what I mean?
so
And
the telos is the game in this scenario.
yeah, well, in this metaphor, when we're talking about um, forgiveness and truth, I don't think they're games. I think they're either I think there's two types of forgiveness. We're talking about like the penalty mechanism, where a good game that people are going to play has to have a mechanism that deals with the rules being broken. Like when you play football and you break the rules, the game can't just end. It has to have some mechanism to absorb bad behavior. And that's one kind of forgiveness. But
Mm.
so I think that's a fair way to look at it. You could also look at it as a strategy, but it's a different kind of forgiveness. A strategy, let's say when you're playing a game, when you're playing baseball, it's not written anywhere in the rules that you have to be kind and you have to forgive other people. You have to, let's say you have to give them grace for things that they've done wrong. But in the game of being a good sport, being a good player, the strategy, if you want to get invited back and you want to play a lot of games and you want to be liked by people, then you, as your strategy, you deploy, I'm going to forgive and I'm going to overlook transgressions.
Yeah, I'm just getting lost in the apples and oranges and pears here.
Is
I,
the
That's
I know
all.
what you mean.
is the truth So truth, that would be something like the rules, right?
I don't I don't I
What
don't
if
know.
what if we ditched all these analogies?
Ditched all these
Let's just
analogies.
shoot
well
it straight here.
I'm suspecting the trouble is the way that you use these words, Jason, when you use truth and forgiveness, I get the impression that they're central players in the story that you're telling and the model that you're using, that how you're modeling reality.
Yeah. I
And
use them somewhat. I feel like I probably don't use them right either. Like I feel like I don't use them very definitively. Like they're almost vague definitions that map onto a lot of things for me. So that's
that makes
probably
sense.
not helpful.
Well, I think that's okay, but a thing that we bump into a lot is that those are fundamental in your model and in my model. The games, rules, arenas, players, etc. Like those are fundamental pieces in the story that I tell. And I think you're a really generous listener, and you spend a lot of time trying to integrate these or say, is it like this? Is it like this? But I think we have a really hard time trying to mesh the way that we model things together,
Yeah. So
which is
in yours,
alarming because it's kind of an indicator that maybe we haven't considered everything,
yeah.
considered the things we should consider.
So
So
wait, in your model, you said the like key players and these I'm guessing these things map onto a lot of other territory for you, right? And you said
maybe
there's
you could just call them key patterns.
yeah. So arenas, players, right? Things like that.
Yes.
Is that what you could you give me examples of how that maps on?
Well, every time you have a goal, a telos,
Okay.
you have some kind of objective. You're looking at the world only in terms of that telos, and you don't really have more than one at a time. At least that's my experience. I'm concerned with one thing at any one time. If I could be working, and if I have to go to the bathroom, I'm going. Right? Like that working game is over, bathroom game
You
is
never
starting.
kill two birds with one stone, Craig.
Well, only if I'm in the bathroom and I'm in the bathroom and I'm on my phone, it's only because that game has been completed. The get to the bathroom game is complete. Right? Like it's out of my focus, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, I think everybody experiences that feeling like, oh, time for something different. Like your attention's whipping you around to different goals.
Mhm.
And
All right, we got
that's
a telos.
largely just because of the fact that we have bodies, right? And we have bodily needs. And then we have these electrochemical systems that want things. Like they want to be satisfied and they want to be homeostatic. And that's when I say games, that's what I mean. It's like you're constantly switching games. But when you're young, you don't really know how to there's games that you play, but you have almost no tools at your disposal. You've mastered almost nothing. So, and this is not my idea. This is a Jean Piaget thing. Is you're mastering games, and then you're using them in other games. If you're going to play on the swing set when you're 5 years old at kindergarten, you're going to be gripping the swing because you've already learned how to do this. You're kicking your legs because you've already learned how to control your legs. You're running because you've learned how to do that. And you're not gonna play tag if you can't run. Right? So you see what I'm saying? But as we get older, we're just stacking these skills into more complex and complex games.
Okay.
So why do you bring it to bear? Um, is there somewhere you're going with this idea?
Well, I think it's related to that video they were talking about, is why it kind of came up, right? Or maybe
Well,
I brought it up because of my
Well, we
comments.
can all appreciate that we accrue skills and they help us to accomplish goals. But if you felt like there's something more uh, somewhere else we're going with this.
well, I'll put it this way. I just don't, I don't think I see, there's nothing that I can draw to mind that doesn't fit inside this way of looking at things.
So
And
that, like, inside your map feels somewhat complete, I guess you're saying.
I don't think I'm not saying it's complete. I'm saying
Everything I know of fits into this category of existing.
it's consistent. It's consistent with my experience, and I feel like it's
Yeah.
it's a way that I think you can think about moral and ethical questions inside of it, and a lot of that just comes from having biology and having
Yeah.
a lot of, there's it feels like there's a lot of emergent richness that you get just by keeping this framework in mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand that I guess feeling. I mean, I don't know the right way to describe it, because that's kind of how I feel with my model too, or whatever. Whenever I'm going on about like mercy and truth, mercy and truth, mercy and truth, like it
Yes.
feels like it maps onto everything for me in such a way that uh it literally helps me understand reality. Like, I don't understand how
You're seeing
reality
it
exists.
everywhere.
And I don't see how anything exists without it, is why I guess it just, yeah, it feels I don't want to say complete. Like, I understand your hesitation of that, like, because it's not complete, because it's definitely a lot of other things you can include there, but it's such a broad pattern, I guess, that I just see literally over everything, to where, yeah,
Yeah.
it like somehow holds the world together. Um, when you mentioned, you said in your model there's arenas and an aim, telos, and players, and that's kind of patterns that map onto things for you. Is the telos kind of like truth?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it might be. What makes you ask?
Well, is the telos kind of like the most high?
Well, I'm hearing that the telos is any given thing.
Yeah. So it can switch, but it's at that moment it rises to the top of your values or something, right? Like, it's the thing to pursue the most at this moment.
It rises to the top of your attention.
Intention. Okay, that's a better way of saying it than values. Okay.
But there's a question which Mitch asked, and this is, I think we should ask this all the time, which is like, so what? Like, what does this have to do? What does any of this have to bring to bear on the rest of what we're up to?
Well, I
Well,
thought you're either challenging something or you're reaching for something, but maybe you just wanted to lay that foundation going forward.
I don't remember exactly where we were and why we. I probably did something funky.
no,
The
the reason
I'm
reason
sure it made sense back then, but
the reason
we're so far away from it.
it's because I was making like these like, what are these absolute claims? I was being a Sith Lord, and that's probably why all this stuff came up. Like, it has to be in mercy, it has to be true. No, but I guess one thing I'd ask is saying, like, anything that rises to the top of your attention, it's like, why? Like, why is it? What's behind that? So, like, why would you get up and use the bathroom?
I think
To
it has nearly everything to do with the demands of our physiology.
Yeah, which, like, it seems like you can always just kind of keep digging with that stuff, and then you get into these weird, crazy questions, because it's like, well, why would you go relieve yourself? So that way you feel better, so that way you don't get like infection or something, so that way your bladder doesn't explode. It's like, but then there's a purpose behind the purpose of even using the restroom. And so it's like, if you keep following the purposes back, it's like, what is the aim? It's like there's like Does that make sense?
Are you saying like
There's a reason behind the reason for you
there's a
doing
reason
that.
for the reasons?
Yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah,
if you
I
keep
don't know.
following,
I'm with you. I don't know that I've spent time considering it.
using the bathroom is probably a bad one to go with, I guess. But like, because you could use a different one, like why get married, why start a family. Like if you start asking
Yeah,
why, it's like none of these things are arbitrary, and so none of these
yeah,
things are like pointless. And they all have a greater
yeah.
a greater purpose, a greater telos like hidden behind them or something. And somehow that relates to beyond just your own personal self-interest in a way. Like it affects kind of the entire human race, even
Mhm.
you having a child or anything like that. So
Yes. The main way I felt it came to bear, maybe the reason I again I feel so silly because I think you guys are indulging me in something. I'm probably dragging you into territory that's not
no,
relevant. But the
this
reason it felt like it came to bear on our discussion about different modes of interpretation is because we we were kind of having a zooming out moment of asking what are we really asking here. And the reason I brought up the games at different nested games is because it seems like we're doing at one time when we're thinking about these questions, we're either doing logical type of association where we have premises leading to some kind of conclusion, but then we also have this is like associations within a game. And then Jason, you do a thing a lot, and I think this is fun. You do this in a way that I think almost nobody does, which is you're not thinking logically, you're thinking analogically, where you're building bridges between games. So you're talking about let's say subjects in one game with in terms of language from another game. Do you know what I mean? Maybe instead of game, you could say paradigm. Like you're using language from one paradigm to describe another one.
Is that really so different from a logical kind of sensibility?
Well, it seems to me they have a totally different character because it's a totally different type of association. Like in an analogical association between things, you're saying that something you're trying to describe, you describe it with reference to something else that has similar features.
okay. I probably do that a lot. It's probably too much. I feel like
But
I confuse things a lot when I do that.
well,
Well,
it's really helpful because it's intuitive, and you're drawing inferences about whatever we're talking about by referencing knowledge from something else. But it seems like sometimes, but it's not causal. It's not causal in the way that a logical, how do I say this? Do you see what I'm getting at? Like logical thinking and analogical thinking, there's a chain of causation when you're thinking logically, and so you can kind of build an argument out of it. But I think what I'm interested in knowing is when you're talking analogically, it seems like you're not it's not as if you're trying to prove something or build an argument. It's as if you're trying to chain together these kind of aesthetic
Yeah. Yeah.
objects. But I don't the thing is I think there's go ahead, Mitch.
it's to the end of helping you understand what's in play. Right? That's sort of the science behind the analogy. Um, I want to better understand what this is. So how can I bring in something else to shed light on it? But it's all in that same straightforward game of getting from point A to point B. So that's why I think there's like a logic to it. But
It seems like maybe this is a temperamental difference. I don't know. It doesn't feel, if you're to present me with you should believe, let's say, you should believe that truth needs to be nested in mercy, or give some example, because it's like some other. I'm struggling for an example here,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have the kind of the persuasive firepower that a causal argument does.
The
You see,
the
you see what I mean?
analogous
Because
one doesn't.
it
Yeah.
just seems like a string of associations.
Yeah.
Well, if the causal logical argument would be if you touch that stove, you will get burnt. And if I'm making an analog, I'm appealing to the causal argument to show you that if you drive drunk, you'll die. It's like touching a burning stove. You'll get burned. And so it's all in the interest of it's all really a rhetorical interest. It's trying to communicate
I think you're
a
totally right.
truth.
Can you say more? I didn't. For some reason, that didn't connect for me.
When,
It's all I
when you
read.
say when you say rhetorical, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's getting a truth into the mind of somebody. It's making it real to them.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I don't. So what's the utility of this? I'll ask this question because I'm not even sure I'm completely following, right? Is it, but this is something I think I do, where I think everybody gets annoyed when people start slinging scripture at each other, like even in Christian circles, when people are just going back and forth. Well, here's this verse, here's this verse, here's this verse. Maybe they don't, but that's
Yeah.
been my experience. People don't like that because you're just quoting scripture. And then, but then the thing I also run into is I'm like, that that really doesn't matter if you're talking to someone who doesn't care about the Bible. And so I'm like, if I actually believe what I read is true in the scripture, then I shouldn't I shouldn't need to refer to scripture to it. I should be able to refer to reality, like say this is how reality is. Like this is, I don't need to reference it. Like if I'm going to talk to an atheist and I'm going to quote a bunch of scripture at him, like I'll like if what's written in my Bible is actually a true statement, then it should lay out a pattern that I can actually see in the world around me. Like I could actually see in the heavens and earth I inhabit. And so maybe that's why the start to look for and like things that are analogous. I don't really know.
Well, you talked about them being persuaded by, or someone's likely not going to be persuaded by scripture if they haven't already
Yeah,
been persuaded that scripture is authoritative or
yeah.
reliable.
And even people that are persuaded that it's authoritative, like we've got into, there's things that seem contradictory, so they're not going to be persuaded either. That's been my encounter. Like you can tell someone, like the easy one is like you could say, the scripture says the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And then I could quote the Old Testament where God says, I kill and I make alive. And then my experience is people will just throw that out or just say, well, that's Old Testament. We don't need that anymore. And I'm like, well, did God change? Did he turn into a different God? And they'll be like, it's almost like, oh, you're misinterpreting it. And it's like, and so it does, I have not found it helpful to actually just sling scripture back and forth, other than, I mean, it happens a lot in Christianity, and I think it's the only thing I've really necessarily found it helpful for is to say, like, is to kind of point out, hey, we need to look at the whole picture, and you can't just cherry pick scripture. And that's the only place I found it helpful, but it's usually never received in a good way, and I don't know that it ever necessarily goes anywhere. So it's been more helpful to me to actually try to look at the patterns that are in scripture, if I believe them to be authoritative and true, and then actually test them and see if they're actually if they actually are analogous to reality, or if they're just, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think what's persuasive about it is when people have heard it or read it, and then they encounter its claims in reality, and they see that it rings true. They see where it starts to map on, but I don't know if they can do that isolated from it. And in any case, I wouldn't take it for granted that everything that Scripture reveals is also revealed elsewhere, so that the purpose
Mm.
of seeing it map on and seeing it ring true in reality is that they would then count it as authoritative and then trust in the other claims that it's making that are specific to it.
The point you made about how it probably shouldn't be just something that it seems weird that it would be everything in it would be validatable by experience.
Yeah,
That's
it would be.
No, I would
Sort
I
of.
would agree with that. I don't think everything would be, but I think maybe the patterns presented in it would be, but not
I
like
might
every
could
specific
say
detail.
everything in it could be validated by experience, but everything in it couldn't be understood merely by experience.
That's good.
By experience alone.
No, that's probably good to say. That is, yeah.
Maybe a question we're clawing at here is what should we use to figure out if the ideas we're discussing are reliable or trustworthy? How do you evaluate them? How do you know that an idea is a good idea or a claim is a good claim?
Yeah, that remains a problem because at the end of the day, you have to trust something you have no reason or no logical reason to trust, I think. How do I know my reason is reasonable? I reason.
So it sounds like you're saying that our reason is, we believe our reason is trustworthy.
Yeah, I mean that's an example of a leap that we make. So I say Scripture is true because Scripture says it is.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that in a leap of faith, like you kind of have to assume you're not mad, right? Like you reason your reason is true. That's what you're saying. Like you
It
could
feels
be.
it feels like what we do in general. I mean, in practice, is there's something at the bottom that we kind of take for granted.
Mhm, for
And
sure.
then once you make some assumptions, it seems in general like people today feel like we can use reason on top of these assumptions. And you can build waypoints and build structures on top of your assumptions.
Yeah. Okay. Are you kind of saying that we take a thing for granted, and then as we build up from it, we find that we had good reason to build up from that specifically? Or no, not at all.
Yes, well, I think so. Maybe as an example, you're a child, you touch a stove, it hurts you. Based on that experience, you're assuming that that experience of touching the stove was reliable and it was going to happen again. And so that's your assumption is it's going to hurt you. And then you can carry out your life in the world, and those assumptions, you're kind of reasoning based on that. Or you might reason, let's say you say a stove is always hot, and so I should never touch a stovetop, even if it's off. But
This is going back to sort of the game mastering and the reliability of your own experience kind of way of judging what's reliable.
yeah, so I guess that's what I think you're totally right. So we assume our experiences. I don't know, this is a difference between us, perhaps. Do you guys think that experience is reliable?
That's a good
Yes,
question. It's a
I
very good
do.
question. Man, I don't know. I gotta think about them more. You know, I've my background would tell me no. Background in Christianity would say because it was
What?
oh yeah, it's word of faith. You don't. It's
Yeah, but
the
they don't say your experience is unreliable. They
yeah.
just say it's not your Lord and Master, and that there's something more reliable than it.
Well, okay, yeah. They might not say it's not reliable, but they would say okay. So the big thing they always pushed in church, the biggest thing was probably healing, then probably prosperity. This is gonna sound bad, but you know where this is going. So if you were sick, you weren't really sick. You don't go off your experience. The Bible says you're not sick, so you just it's the higher truth. So you have like they would always say. I always found this extremely unhelpful for me. You have like the truth and you have the facts, and the truth trumps the facts, or something like that. So you kind of you don't deny the facts, but you ignore the facts or something. I never really could quite piece it together.
Sounds
But
like
then
dinosaurs all over again.
yeah, but the thing is like all that being said, like I'm kind of throwing stones at it. Like for some reason there's still a part of me that thinks that that's true. And I think just because there are things that exist outside of our five senses, right? Like we have ideals that we can actually embody. Like there are higher truths that we move in towards that don't necessarily happen instantaneously, but like so you could say uh there's there's a in there's a version of me I picture that is like I don't know 50 pounds heavier, fully ripped, super muscular, and it's like that exists up here. Like it's a heavenly thing. It's almost like eternal because I could I mean you can't really destroy it. Like you could imagine it whenever you want or something. Now you got a picture, right? Mitch?
Buff
You're laughing.
Jason is
Yeah.
eternal.
No, but I'm saying like but then like so I think there's something to that idea that if you can I don't want to say it's like some weird placebo effect or something, but it's something like imagination and hope are like somehow and faith, like we were kind of getting at this earlier, are all interwoven, and it almost becomes more real than the present. And so you actually progress into it or something. And then you start making it sounds really, really stupid the way I'm
What is that
describing it. Like
idea? That kind
you're
of new
making
age
steps
idea.
towards it. But
What is that called?
it's like I don't know, motivational thinking or something. And the word of faith movement is not quite. It's not. It's different than that. And there are literally, I mean, I've seen literal miracles happen, like that actually happen, like that. So I'm not denying any of that, but I'm saying like it might. It. I don't. I guess to what I'm getting at is like I don't know that I would consider experience reliable, definitely, but I think there is I don't want to throw out the other side, even though I was throwing rocks at it. I think there is something to that idea, definitely. I mean, I've experienced healing in my own life, where I think there is a. I don't want to phrase it that way, where they would say truth kind of trumps facts or whatever, but uh, because that's not the right. I don't think those are the right words to use for what they're trying to describe. But there is a God. There is a. I don't know. There is a like a to use their word, it would be like the truer version of you or something. Or there is a more like you could almost say it's your angel or something, or your perfect self that that exists somewhere in the ether, whatever you want to say, that can actually manifest in the natural. Um sorry. Craig, your face, you're just like I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
I can't stop laughing at Buff Jason, the eternal Buff Jason.
Oh yeah, he's out there, man. So is the fat Jason too, though. So I can be whichever I want to be.
But yes, experience is reliable. I think everybody kind of agrees on that.
I
If
would
not
say everybody,
out
but
loud in practice.
in practice, yeah, probably in practice. Dude, I don't, dude, I'm serious. It has been extremely. It sucks because it's like I don't know what to do with it because it's been extremely helpful and extremely harmful at the same time to have this sort of this sort of mindset where you almost deny your experience and press in through faith is what they would say. And I mean, there's literally been probably countless miracles that have come through that, but I've witnessed people die because of that, because they won't acknowledge. It's almost like this denial of the reality going on around them because they're standing in faith and they're denying the facts. They're denying experience, and they
Do you
literally
mean
die.
literally die?
Literally die. Yeah.
Could you give an example?
Um, well, this almost happened to me with the cat bite on my hand, where I was trying to believe like it would just be taken care of, but God would heal it or whatever. And I was like, I mean, the whole time I'm in prayer, trying to be humble. Like, should I go to the hospital? Should I get it looked at? And what was going through my head was like, I don't really want pain to be the defining factor of what's going to make me like not believe or something. Like this is, I mean, this is like so I just didn't go. And then my mom got super upset, was super mad, like, you need to go to the hospital. Man, I'm sharing all this on the freaking recording. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna let my mom's hysteria drive me to the hospital. Like I'm only like I don't want fear, I don't want pain, I don't want any of those things like directing me. Which I still think I should never necessarily be directed by those things. Otherwise, I could never lay down my life in martyrdom or anything. I'd be like, oh, this sucks. Pain's gonna direct my decisions now. So I think there is utility in that. But then I literally, I mean, I almost didn't go. The night like I went. I mean, it was an experience of humility for me too, but it was basically just through prayer and trying to find out what God wanted me to do. And then just I just went to the hospital and but by that time, like the infection was going on my arm, like to my heart. And so like I probably if I would have waited a week, I probably would have died. It probably would have went into my heart and killed me.
Well, I don't see, because it's not a matter of not ever using experience or fear or something to direct you. It's just having your directors in order, right? If you fear can direct you out of a bad situation, or you could say there's something higher directing me than fear that would lead me into martyrdom, like self-sacrifice.
Or
So
fear of God or something, maybe. I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
but I wouldn't ever discount experience or fear as directors.
Well, see, there is man, it's that's why it's hard for me to talk about these things sometimes because like I've literally when I had the pain in my face, uh it wasn't really a denial of the facts though. Like it was basically got to a point where but I do remember saying like as long as I have this, I'm not gonna say I'm just like as long as I live, I'm not gonna vocalize it sort of thing. Like I'm not gonna say I'm sick. I'm not gonna say I'm in pain. But at the same time, it was definitely acknowledging that it was there because I remember saying like this is like God, why have you forsaken me? Like this is I can't bear this pain anymore. And then it got to the point where it was like, well, if that's that, I'll just keep bearing the pain as long as you're with me. As long as you promise to be with me, I'll keep bearing the pain and I won't say that I have it anymore. And so I don't even think it was that no, it wasn't denied. So in that sense, like I wasn't denying the facts there. And even with the infection, it wasn't like I was denying the facts like I had an infection in my hand. It was just kind of I mean, it really comes out of a desire for wanting to see I mean, maybe it's a self I don't think it was a selfish thing though for wanting to see like a miracle or something or to want to see uh you know
In
something
hindsight, you say you think you were misguided.
with the cat thing,
Yeah.
the infection. No, 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 no. I think I mean ultimately I went and got the surgery done and I think I made the right choice and I would man, it's hard for me to have regrets because I think uh my mom being hysterical was an extreme was a good learning experience for both me and her. So like I'm kind of glad it all worked out the way it did. Uh,
But it sounds like you changed your mind and that could have saved your life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's weird because it definitely did probably save my life, but there's a weird hypocrisy that like kind of is underneath it all the whole time too, because it's like, uh, yeah, I don't know what it was. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't really regret that, but I don't know why I shared all that. I guess just because of the whole denying experience thing, because I will say that basically because you said, Mitch, that like that that it's all pretty clear that we don't deny experience, and I think maybe subconsciously everybody thinks that, but I mean there are definitely circles where they purposely deny experience, and I have witnessed people die because of it, uh more than more than one person, like, and I myself almost probably could have died because of that. I don't know, but then all that being said, I still don't like hospitals. I still would rather not go. I'd rather just let my body work it out. And I thought it was gonna do that. I thought God was gonna heal me. And it was like, no, if the cat's got the better of you, you're going down.
Doctors hate him for this one trick.
What? Man, I kind of don't want to post this video.
Every time I open my mouth, I'm embarrassed.
Me too.
Me especially, man. Please.
Oh, me too. It's so funny. I'm glad I'm not alone.
We'll call this one a learning experience. You just burn this one, Jason.
A learning experience. That's what my
I,
whole
I
life
feel like
is.
we're extremely disorganized.
And well, that's what I love about Jason's thing, man. Is you just come and you shoot the bull, and occasionally a goose lays a golden egg.
I feel like we're usually. I feel like. By the way, I feel like we're usually all of us. I feel like we're a little more directed.
Really?
Usually,
And
normally,
I'm
yeah.
I'm, I'm
Good.
speaking.
I'm happiest when we're goofing. Well, but on the last video, like I was so flustered after it was over. I was like, I could not say one thing right, But
Really,
you know,
I thought you.
yeah.
I thought you were fine.
Oh
Yeah, I thought you
man,
were. I thought you did
I
great.
was I was seeing all the ideas, and and it was a little bit like at one part of this where I couldn't get this game metaphor right, but I like the loosey goosiness of it. I think people can come to Jason's channel and feel like they can, feel at ease without having to have some like big like axe to
Yeah,
grind or like some profound thing to say. They
yeah,
can just come here and shoot the bull, and maybe just talking it out can like help them work towards
yeah.
like the more integrated stuff that they can apply to their life.
I I feel that way too. I never feel this way about anybody else except myself. I'll say something or just respond some stupid way, and I'm like, this was the last straw. One of Jason's listeners is this was it for them.
Oh,
They're
I see
never
what you're
they're
saying.
thinking they're like, I'm never coming back to this channel because of that guy.
No chance. No,
Really?
I'm
I
pretty
never think that
confident. I
about you
think you're a
guys.
big draw, Craig. I think you're a big draw. You always
Yeah,
keep me coming back.
same here. I never think that about either of you guys. It's the same way though. I'll think that about myself all the time. Like everything I've said tonight, I'm like, I feel like nothing had any relevance to what we were talking. We'd be on a subject, and then I'd say something stupid and take it a different direction. Then I share this stupid story about a cat bite. There's my scar, and that.
You know
But
what
you
would be
sometimes
helpful?
come. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Mitch.
After you.
We're like two dummies standing in front of a trap door. You're like, you go. What I was going to say is maybe it would be productive sometime to do a kind of survey of where everybody stands on some issues like the one. Do we believe that experience is reliable? Do we kind of go through the gamut of the history of philosophy and religious disputes and just kind of make a little table of who agrees on what and who doesn't agree on what?
Well, could I
Then we
ask you a
can burn the
question
witches.
related? Yeah, could I ask you a question related to that? That same thing. So you have the cat bite thing, that whole story. So here's the other story with the warts that I've mentioned this to you guys before. I think both of you. So I remember, I'll just say like how it happened. I kept believing that God would heal me of these warts. I had warts all over my neck, like a lot of other places on my body, but every time it was mostly on my neck. And every time I would shave, I'd nick them. The blood would
Mm.
get into the open pores. It would just spread more warts. I was having to freeze them off all the time. I was having to use this like herbal thing to like, which would basically create craters in your body, and eat out the wart. Um, but then I kept praying and I was believing God would heal me of them. And I kept believing God would heal me. And I had these scriptures I would just recite, probably a list of 100 scriptures, all related to like healing, stuff like that. I would recite them every single day while I was driving for work, just go through. And I had them like, eventually I had them all memorized. And then I remember I walked into the bathroom when I was at the courthouse once, and I just remember looking in the mirror and they were like all over my neck. And I remember that one verse, it's just a clip from a verse, and it says, it's in Romans, and it says, "What then can I say to these things? If God is for me, who can be against me?" And I remember reciting that, like looking at the words, reciting that verse, and thinking like, "What then can I say of these things? If God is for me, who can be against me?" And for some reason, like I literally felt like it's, I can't describe it. It wasn't like a rational thing, but it felt like something kind of shifted and I just didn't necessarily care anymore. And it was almost like a denial of, it wasn't necessarily denial of reality, but it was just like that that verse or something superseded my experience in that moment. And it was just kind of like, it's fine, no big deal. And then they started to itch after that. I still don't know that I necessarily believed it consciously, because I remember not wanting to scratch them because I didn't want them to bleed because I knew they would spread. Then finally, it just kept getting to that point. Just kept thinking, well, do I really trust God? I should just scratch them and just not worry about it. Just not worry about it. And so finally I would scratch them. They scabbed up and went away and never came back. So it was like either something shifted internally, like spiritually, something shifted psychologically, like you could say almost like a placebo effect or something. Something happened and then it caused my physical body to actually shift, and where my body recognized the wart virus and actually fought it off from within. And I don't know what to do with that experience, because it almost seems like the counterpoint to the denial of like, hey, I actually did deny my experience and it did work. But I don't know that I
Wow.
necessarily denied
This
experience,
is this is
but
that
Exactly.
sounds that sounds more like we're talking about the placebo effect.
like that,
Some
where like it's a conscious shift in your consciousness, in your
well, it wasn't as if you didn't believe that you had warts.
yeah, it was, yeah, I didn't, yeah, I see what you're saying. But I was a belief that it would all be fine or something like that. I don't really know how to describe it.
Yeah, that's something.
Like the
Mine
warts,
are still here, Jason.
the the warts I had for, God, it was well over 10 years too. So it's just fascinating that the existence of this physical manifestation of this thing on my body became lesser than the healing power of God, you could say, or the healing power of my body. Like, even if that was a placebo effect in my brain, it's weird that it flipped and one superseded the other. And it was like, this one is now more important in my mind, that my body will be healed or heal itself. And this now has flipped above the actual existence of the warts. Because before it was always reverse, sort of. It was like the warts are here, the warts are here, the warts are still here, like sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to describe it necessarily. Because it's like, I mean, how do you even, I don't even know how to put that experience into words that are like, or into like a way like
Well,
I,
Christians have a category for that experience, right?
yeah, a miracle, right? Was it, what do you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're healed by faith.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
That's, yeah, and that's what I mean. But I don't. I guess it really wasn't a denial of experience, but it was like something superseded my experience or something like this. like this promise
Well,
of a
even
healed.
even then, because you maybe even before that you had experiences of witnessing miracles. So it's actually in conjunction with your experience.
Here's the situation. Trying to think if I did have any more. I'm sure I did. I'm sure I saw stuff.
Your experience was that healing could happen and miracles did happen.
What about the person who doesn't? Is there something they could read in scripture and take it as a, like, you could even say it's a placebo effect, but they could take it as a placebo effect, as in this promise of I will be healed, my flesh will be restored like a child's. Like there is a scripture in the verse that says that. You could say this scripture is like, this promise is almost taken like a placebo effect till it registers in the mind. Could that, I mean, it would seem to me like that's actually the case. If placebos actually work, it could be something
They
similar.
do.
Yeah. So it seems like that would actually be almost analogous to that happening, which doesn't seem, I mean, it doesn't seem like, I don't know why it's not plausible then, because even with placebos, it's literally nothing there except a promise. It's the same thing. It's a promise
So
from,
you don't understand why placebos are plausible, faith healings aren't plausible?
yeah, why I would come to that conclusion. I would think even if they worked, I mean, I don't think they're this, wouldn't want to reduce a faith healing to just a placebo effect, but I was saying if you could make the connection with the two, I don't know why you wouldn't believe in a faith healing, because a
Yeah, I
placebo,
think they're both plausible.
When you say faith healing, Jason, the way you use that, are you imagining, are you trying to convey something like God is at the controls, he's waiting, and he actually flips a switch and he intervenes in his intention actually that he takes an action to intervene in the physical world?
I guess you could describe it that way. That maybe puts kind of got into that whole idea we talked about before, where he's like sitting, you picture a man up in the clouds, like,
But so yeah, but it sounds like you don't see him that way.
no, not
Except
anymore, but maybe I used to, maybe at some point, but
now I don't know quite how to ask this, but if you don't see him that way, maybe I don't want to offer an alternative. I don't want to just continue asking, is it like this? Is it like this? But I'm going to do it. Do you see him? I'm not going to do that. How do you see it instead? That healing by faith. If it's not,
instead of God,
if
instead
it's
of
not,
just
if it's
flipping the
not a
switch.
being God taking an action to intervene in the physical world, what is it like?
Really
Oh, man.
question.
Sorry, there's a lot of dead airspace here. I don't know how to
Sit in
answer
it.
that. I don't know. Man, I don't know. It's I like, if I don't see it as God just waiting there. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it exactly. Like that, I think, like the way I picture it now is, okay, I mean, it is so like going back to the beginning of this conversation, I think it is the that pattern of I don't necessarily want to say forgiveness, because I don't think any sickness necessarily means you need forgiveness, but um what's going
It
on,
fits in with
what's,
your missing the mark paradigm.
yeah, well,
Who
what's
is
going
it?
on inside your body when you have something like that? Like when you have any sort of ailment, it's like something's wrong internally, like maybe even on a molecular level. And so there's
You have a
like almost,
malfunctioning system.
so it's like there's almost a redemption or a restoration that needs to be made, like within the biological sense, even. And
When you
so
say
there's
restoration, are you talking about it? You're talking about you're speaking poetically. It sounds like you're talking about a calibration, like an electrochemical calibration.
yeah, you could say something like that. So like I think that the way I maybe see it now is that that's the like it sounds so cliche and stupid, but when you say God is love, it's like that. I don't know what other way to get at is that's like the creating force for like everything, and what I said in the text I think was like it's whatever force uh makes new and renews, right? So it's a it's whatever force that is in creation, that is continue that actually creates things, but then renews them still because it allows them. I don't want to learn all that, but so to me that I guess I usually describe it as something like forgiveness, like and so that like I said that maps on to like so many different things, or mercy or something, and so I would think that like that poetic language, like I guess you said, those analogies would somehow map onto even the biological level, which I think also work somehow alongside the psychological level and the spiritual level.
I'm struggling to understand because those things that you're using words like mercy and love, but those are anthropomorphic type words. These are things that a being does.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I mean, if the subtext of this question was, is something with agency causing the healing?
Oh, that's a better way. I think I was picturing like, do you picture like an actual person there waiting to flip a switch or whatever? And I'm like, no,
Is it
but
something
there,
with agency and doing an action?
I guess so, right? I mean, it would be. I mean, I would think because they're like an animating force basically, or something. Yeah, I would think so. I have no idea. Your
Well,
guys'
when I hear
expressions right now, like I don't even know if I'm understanding the question right because you guys are looking at me
I well
like I'm just a
here
fool. Like I
No.
don't even know. God. Oh man. I feel like this is one of those Michael Robb situations. It's like you can't really believe that, can you?
Oh.
I'm like, no, I don't know. Do I? What?
well, something I hear people say, and I think I know people who believe things like this. They would say, in that situation with the words, it wasn't that there was some being someplace that recognized that you had the correct amount of faith and then sprung into action, and went and they tickled all your, your limbic system and your endocrine system in the right way that made it heal itself. Instead, it was that someone might say, you reorganized your electrochemical system, your neural system in a way that allowed those systems to regain the correct order. It
You
wasn't as
healed
if
yourself.
somebody you healed yourself, but it more, think of it almost like you unblocked a traffic jam in the flow of chemicals and electrical signals in your body.
Through sheer force of mental will, or
Well, the mental will itself is an electrochemical pattern.
Mhm. So I'm okay with that being the case. The thing that gets weird though is that um, why did that occur through no in specific intention of mine to do that? Like it was not. It literally occurred from me pursuing God. Like that's the only way I know how to describe it is pursuing God and reading the scriptures, and then there was that shift.
I guess the pursuit of God in that scenario would be the placebo.
Yes, because you're enacting a pattern a neural pattern where you're saying my body will heal itself, and you're sending body heal itself signals to your body.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could say that,
Position
but I
for
was not
lifestyle.
saying those things. I was saying God. I had no thought in my head that my body would heal itself. Does that make
But it
sense? I
sounds like,
thought,
but it sounds like you had confidence that it would be resolved.
yeah, that it would be resolved. Yeah, yeah. But I was thinking more like, oh, God will resolve this. I'll wake up
Right.
and they'll
Not
just
my
be
body.
gone, disappeared or something. Yeah, yeah. I didn't
Right.
think it
But
would
you
resolve in that way. Yeah.
But your belief that God would resolve it was the placebo that helped you to order your.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, which is probably going to sound to most people like they think that's a reduction of the miracle or something, but to me that's not. I don't know why that would be.
Well, it might strip the agency from God, or strip the existence of God from God.
Yeah, would it? But then
well,
because then I feel like you get into things like consciousness, and then I feel like it just it you have to keep looking at things like that, and then you're gonna hit God again.
in that situation, it seems like if somebody believed what we just described, they would be using God as a stand-in term for systems that are so complex that they're beyond our ability to evaluate. And because those systems behave kind of like something with agency, it's okay to poetically describe, to call them God. But I wonder if there was a puzzled look on my face when you gave the answer, and you're stunned by our silence. I was kind of predicting when you answered the question, you would say something like God leaned in and pulled the lever, or it was a placebo effect and it was the signals in my body organized themselves. But I didn't feel like you said either one of those, but I'm still not really sure which
don't.
Well,
one
yeah, you kind of said, I guess.
which one are you closer to?
And I really want to side with God pulled it in the and pulled the lever just because that's such a better to me. That's just such a more fun way to put it. But I kind of feel like it's both. I don't know why. Like I feel like it's the same. Like just using that imagery, like not saying oh there was a physical or whatever, but using that imagery, I feel like yeah, because I think it's a communion, I think it's a communion with this divine higher love is what actually causes the shift in my body. So it's can I have both? Can I choose both? But see, like part of me wants to even I think because I believe in angels and all that stuff too. Like I just want to be like, oh, let's go really, really mystical and say like God pulled the lever, then he sent out his angel Raphael and he showed up in my bed and hit me with a wand, and then like that sounds great. I want to go that way.
Well,
But
the reason I had the puzzled look was because I thought that's the easiest answer for a Christian to give in the world. It's like,
is
of
that
course, God had agency and willed this, you
yeah.
know,
But
which I think every Christian believes.
but I think
Even if we
I don't
take,
think they do.
even if, okay, what was the definition that Cal gave the other night? Can you articulate it?
What
Sure, I paraphrase it.
the definition of what? Of a Christian?
Mm-hmm.
The impression I had was somebody who believes, well, somebody that has Christ as
Philos, right?
the guiding principle, uses Christ as the guiding principle of their life.
I thought he said something more along the lines of Christ is the guiding teacher, even if that was from a moral vantage point.
It sounded like that. I think that's a fair way to say it.
And if that's the case, I mean, Christ does nothing but talk about God's will and praise for God's will and alludes to God's will. So I can't
I
think
failed
of a
the
definition
test.
of a Christian that would cast off God's having agency.
I wasn't trying to say that. I was just trying to say that his agency is in everything. I was trying
When
I
you
guess that's what I
say
was
it
saying
could
is
be both, when you say it could be him pulling the lever and the placebo kind of mechanism that we don't understand, that makes a lot of sense.
How so?
Well, you there's lots of Christians have God as the one who enacted the what is it, the watch kind of metaphor, where like he sent it spinning and now it, like, the gears turn on their own. I mean,
So
that idea exists, but there's not a Christian reckoning of God that has him not being an agent.
well, there's a weird thing that happens because we don't talk about it in enough detail. Because if I was to, let's say we just press the issue, and we think about how many ways is it possible that God did this? Could he, when the rubber hits the road, did he go and did he add, did more white blood cells appear in the right place in Jason's body? Like, did certain molecules appear as if from nowhere, supernaturally, and that's what caused the change? Do you see what I mean? Like, it has to. There's a do we believe? Do you think Christian people believe that kind of thing, where there's a unexpected appearance or physics breaking event in the world? Is that what Christians would say?
I wouldn't throw that out.
That doesn't seem out of bounds at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not out of bounds for me either. I wondered. I know it would be out of bounds for probably a lot of people, maybe, but then maybe this is where I don't deny experience either. Like, I've actually experienced other things too, where it's like just inexplicable to just if I just reduce things to the material realm, it's like this makes absolutely no freaking sense whatsoever. Like, there has to be some sort of divine, I don't want to say divine, at least otherworldly, whatever, intervention. And most people, I think a lot of people would probably, maybe I shouldn't say most, but there's probably a lot of people that don't even believe in God that would own up to the same thing if you started talking about like demonic experiences and stuff. Like, people will believe in ghosts before they believe in God sometimes, and they'll have experiences where like it's supernatural, but it's like they you can't describe it with natural things. So I wouldn't. So even taking all that into account, I wouldn't throw out anything.
It's a little suspicious to me in that framework that you can have things appear, organized things like a red blood cell. A blood cell, period, is a very complex object in the physical world. It's very sophisticated, right? But we're willing to say, yeah, sure, God materializes them all the time, or something similar to that. But we never say, oh, God materialized a house as if from nowhere. There was this hill and there was nothing on it, and then suddenly there was a house.
We do say that when we tell the creation story, so to speak.
But I mean, when we say God does miracles in the physical world, we're always talking
They're
about
always on the invisible level.
exactly. And so that seems a little suspicious to me.
Wait, they're always on the invisible level?
Yes.
Like
because
warts
it's not-
disappearing.
It happened on the microscopic level and the imperceptible level. Like, oh, you just weren't, like, if you had a microscope there at the right time, you would have caught it, but you just didn't. It's never at a level that is actually verifiable.
What do
Like,
you think, Jason?
wait, what do you mean? Like it doesn't manifest in the natural or something?
Well, it doesn't, we don't think, I don't hear Christians making claims like, we say God healed Jason of his warts. Like, and if you press them, they'd say he put the right hormones in your body in the right
To
place.
fight it, to fight it off.
Those hormones appeared, those molecules appeared in your bloodstream out of nowhere.
Well, that's not even
But
how
it's-
I heard it described. I heard it described as there were visible warts right here, and then they were invisible.
Sure, that too. It could be like that. And they said if you were filming, right at that moment, they would have been gone. Or if it's in your endocrine system, if you would have had a microscope in his veins, you would have seen, if you're looking at a snapshot, there was nothing, and then there was a blood cell. Right? That's what you have to say.
Do you guys
I do
you
hear
guys have any?
Christians tell stories of visible things, but I won't bring it to bear. I think your point is a very good one.
Yeah, I mean, you have all those weird stories that are people always say are like cheap parlor tricks of people's legs growing out, where they'll film
Right.
those. But do you guys okay? So not even thinking just like good experiences. Do either of you have any experiences at all of like this has been a conversation I've wanted to get into for a little while of like just anything like you're describing, like supernatural that actually has been indescribable or like hasn't been invisible, like something's happened to you and you think back and like this has to be something beyond this realm or something like that. I'm gonna make you guys sound crazy too, all right? I feel like I've been in the hot seat and sound like a madman this whole time.
I'm no fool.
But yeah.
I see the red glowing dot in the upper left-hand corner.
I mean, I have some. That's why I'm curious. And I know
We know
like
you. We know you have some.
yeah. And my dad, like even my dad, I've tried to gather stories from him and my aunts and uncles too, because they lived in a house in Florida and the whole place was haunted. So they have lots of stories like that.
I can't remember if I told recently that I hate telling these because when it's like when you tell a dream that you had and it comes out of your mouth and you're like, that doesn't sound like anything like it was when I had it. Like
Yeah.
it was incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So I hate telling them. I guess I have one or two probably.
So
Are
you
you
do have
saying?
a
They turn to
I,
mush in my mouth.
are you telling us this so that we can just you can convey? Are you conveying the essential message without telling the story, or are you giving us license to ask you?
No, I don't want to tell them, so I probably won't.
Can I echo your sentiment and say I have the same experience? And not only that, if anything, it sounds dumb coming out of my mouth, but then also, if anything, it's not that I question the physical laws, like the laws of that govern the place. I question the reliability of my memory and my experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's part of it's interesting that Jesus came doing miracles at all. But he does get to a few places when he says, only a foolish, wicked generation asks for a sign. And then you have the story of Lazarus where it's like, even if I sent, an angel to tell your brothers, they wouldn't believe it. There's kind of like this going refrain of people doing just that, where and I do it with almost every weird experience I have. I find a category for it and I put it in there. I immediately like I'm
yeah.
the person
Yeah.
of little faith. That's
Then I think there's a danger of going the other way too, where you take
yeah,
everything and yeah,
probably.
and everything. I mean, what did people used to do that, and everything was a demon too. I think I've heard of people doing that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can I press into this because it disturbs me more and more the more I think about it. When we talk about miracles, the only miracles that we claim in general, I don't really hear people claiming that miracles happened that aren't attributable to other causes. Like I hear miracles like, somebody sent me $1,000 out of nowhere. It was the craziest coincidence, and I needed it right then.
Mhm.
It's never something that has no explanation.
Yeah, well, I guess what we need to do is go on a little quest here and start talking to people.
Wait, what do you mean has no explanation?
A house
Like,
doesn't
so you can't
materialize
like
on the hill.
okay, so
I
you can
never
kind
hear
of
people
trace it
say,
back to a person.
I never hear someone saying something like, well, we were walking and I was walking with my friend and then he just teleported away. It was like
Mhm.
I was looking at him and then suddenly he dematerialized. Like there's nothing that just totally defies explanation. There's all the miracle stories I hear
But the thing is, even
You have a
I'm
new
pretty sure,
telos.
Craig, I'm pretty sure as I'm like searching my brain for one, I'm like, no, I've already put that there. I've already put that there. It feels like whatever we are handed, like we're going to find some sort of materialist explanation for it.
I don't think so. I think there's experiences that we could have and that totally transcend the expectations we have about how the physical world works. But most of the stories I hear are things like, oh, my body miraculously was healed of something, when we know on plenty of occasions our body heals itself spontaneously without our knowing how it happened. But
Yeah.
we
Yeah, I
never
gotta
have.
think of more.
We're never, no one's ever saying we were there. We were standing in our yard, and suddenly there was a bonfire out of nowhere.
I'm not sure that people are saying this.
Man, like
That they're
I feel like
not?
I got a new aim now. I got a new game to play. This is gonna get crazy weird.
But we knew it. Like, we know that people, on average,
There are whole television shows dedicated to this very thing you're saying never happened.
we're
They all
talking about,
seem crazy.
And podcasts and everything. Just people are
right?
coming up with
But
these stories all the time. And what do we
but
do
we
when we hear them? We
but
categorize them. That was their imagination. They had a bad trip. It was a
they're
weird dream.
lying.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't. What I'm saying is, we don't really have. I don't know about you. As an adult person, I don't have these experiences, and I don't know anybody who I can attest has a normal track record of reliability that also.
I know.
uh,
You kind of lose your track record as soon as you start talking about these
I
things,
I
don't
don't
you?
know anybody who has a track record or a good track record who says things like this.
So if I came to you in a year or so with a story of a house materializing on a hill, would you think I had gone off my nut, or would you think I had seen a house materialize on a hill?
I would think you'd seen it on you'd seen a house materialize on the hill, but whether I get wait
You would
because I
come
guess
up with a reason
the
why I
keyword
saw that.
the keyword is materialize, right? So I'm like I don't know about that
Yes,
then. Yeah.
right.
Because you
You're
could say
not
you
talking about
hallucinated.
when you say materialize, you mean one instant it was not there, and then the other instant
You
it was
would
there.
find, you would hunt, you would ask me questions until you found something that explained it. And if you didn't
No,
find something, you would say, Mitch, you're off your nut and you need help. You need to go see a therapist.
I think I would probably believe you, but
I think I would have no choice to believe that that was what you. I wouldn't think you're lying to me. I would believe that that is what you experienced.
You would have a materialist category for it in your mind, I think.
I don't think I would. I don't know how I would. I think I would have to resort to he's lying or had a delusion of some kind.
Mm.
man, I really hope this happens to you
Because
now.
Those
well,
I
the
really
thing
want to
is,
believe in
materialist
something like
categories.
this.
the thing is that the chance of you actually having an experience of that caliber is near zero, though. I
I
think
don't
we all
think
know.
so.
There's this
Because again, there are seasons and seasons of television based on this very issue. It's good television. I think if we go around and interview our friends, we won't be hard pressed to find something.
Well, I think the point the point I'm making is not that there's never claims of this, but there are a lot of claims of miracles, and on average, they're all like there's a lot of miracle claims, a lot.
well, the weird thing to me
That's
is
compelling, isn't it?
the
Well,
miracle.
what's not compelling, it would be compelling if
Because they're all invisible. But I'm saying I don't think they are.
I think the vast majority of miracle claims are uh, miracles that are explainable by other resources, let's say, by other
Eh.
explanations.
Yeah, there's always the thing is there's always a materialist explanation. There's always one to find. Like you can cook up one if there isn't one already.
Well, listen, there's a scale of plausibility for the materialist explanation, right?
I'm
Like
trying to.
I'm saying the miracles all happen on this very plausible, this in this little region where the materialist explanation is very likely or consistent with other experiences.
I want to say I've heard some doozies, but then I know you'll try to make me tell them. But
What about? I
Tell
mean,
us
I've
some
heard.
doozies. I won't say anything.
there's some doozies. I mean, people tell crazy stories all the time about insane, impossible things that happen,
Tell me
and we
some.
write them off over and over and over and over.
I can think the ones I'm thinking of are like, and I mean, I wasn't there for them because you just hear about these stories of like the healing revivals that happened. What was it like the 80s or something? I can't remember.
Mhm.
But
D.A.
there's
Sousa.
stories of like people pulling tumors off other people or something, or which
Tumors like a brain tumor
like
or
a
a
like
surface
growth, like
tumor.
a big surface tumor, and they'll pull
Jason,
it
that's a
off. And
surgeon's job.
that's, but that's those are stories I've heard
With their
of.
bare hands.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. From what I hear, and
And
it's
eating it.
just fine. I mean, I guess I don't know what happens. I wasn't there. I don't know if there's like a big wound left, or if it's. I would assume it'd be healed up underneath. I'm trying to think of other ones that I've heard of. I know Smith
But you
Wiggle.
watch Benny Hinn.
Somebody just pulls.
Yeah,
us.
Betty Hinn.
This guy's gotta come off.
Yeah, but Betty Hinn's one of them, right? I mean, it's supposedly he has a lot of stories, and whether you believe him or not, and whether he charged people for them or not, that's debatable, I guess. I don't know. And
Smith
I don't know. I really
Wigglesworth, that's your guy.
that's what I was about to mention. Supposedly he kicked a baby, and
Hmm.
I guess you could maybe explain that away materialistically, but it's still pretty wild.
You can explain kicking a baby away materialistically.
Maybe
another
maybe it
one.
was like CPR. He kicked it in the chest and it came back to life.
What would be compelling is if these physically inexplainable miracles were witnessed by large groups of people. Or
There
more than
are
one.
cases like this.
I want a list.
Yeah. Well, it's just one Wikipedia search away.
Yeah, see, I was trying to that's what I was actually wanting to do for a while, was to go around and interview people and get their stories so I could have a collection and then piece them all together and do this. But you guys won't share your stories. I've been the
Jason,
one sharing all these stories tonight. Sounding
if you
crazy.
name this video top 10 unexplained phenomenon witnessed by millions, there's just no stopping your traffic. It'll be like
Yeah.
a raccoon eating out of your hand.
All right. All right. And so here's a question that I've been kind of wanting to ask, because but I guess this seems stupid now, because Mitch, you keep saying how there are all these stories that many people have seen, lots of different things, and like people will say they've seen angels and stuff. But I was gonna ask earlier, is are more of these inexplicable things found in the demonic realm, or like because you kind of almost have these two sides of the coin. Like one is
like, are more of the experiences evil or good?
yeah, or maybe not even evil, because I guess there's a whole list of neutral stuff too when you get into like fairies and jinns and things like that, which aren't Christian per se, but they would do you think there's more stories like that? Or because it seems to me from my experience, personal experience, most people I talk to personally have had more encounters with what we would call evil spirits than good spirits. And maybe you could argue they've had more encounters with good spirits, just haven't been as obvious, like Craig is talking about. Like it almost is like you have to be looking to notice them, or you have to be looking to see maybe God's hand on the situation or something.
Yeah, my most unguarded self would say that, you know, all the affairs of mice and men don't add up to a hill of beans, and it's mostly the supernatural behind the curtain stuff that's at play on either side, on both sides. And because I think, well, I don't know.
I'm perplexed because I thought that on average you felt like our experience was reliable.
Yeah, I do.
So what we're seeing is reliable, but there's things that we could be seeing that we're not.
What we're seeing is reliable. I mean, it's actually happening. But that which is, it's like with atoms or cells, it's like there's something else going on that we are not
Right.
privy to, so to speak.
I'm with you. I'm not attacking you. The tone of my voice probably made it sound like I was. I think what you're saying is a totally defensible thing to say.
Yeah, it makes it makes more sense that way too when you understand even angels and spirits and other consciousnesses as like intelligences or things like that. And then you're like, it almost all seems like it's coming from a.
This is
Go ahead.
weird because I think I would probably say the same things. I think that experience is reliable, and I think that there's a lot of reality that is occluded. But I don't know that it's occluded. I wouldn't say that it's occluded from our understanding, period. The way that what I mean by that is it's occluded by scale. Like some things are so small that they're not perceptible to us, even with instruments. And reality is occluded in that way. Or there are things that are so large that we're too small to detect. So I would say that there's things that parts of reality that are invisible to us or concealed from us in that way. But I feel like the way that a lot of Christian people say it is as if there's like a class of matter that we can't detect, or classes of, waves that we can't detect. And I don't know precisely
It
what
doesn't
they
sound that much different to me than what you said, though.
Well, the explanation would be I suppose it's different in the sense that the waves are indetectable. Like, are we saying that there's waves that exist at the same, besides electromagnetic waves, besides the things that we can detect that we're just not detecting?
What
I don't
are
know if I have the nomenclature for it, but it doesn't seem absurd.
what is so like because I don't know anything about science. I'm so uneducated when it comes to school.
This is a courageous thing to say, Jason.
Electromagnetic waves. So is this like what is consciousness then? Like what is telepathy? Like is that related? Because that do you not think that exists? Because I would think that exists. Because I mean
Telepathy?
well yeah for sure. Like me and Natalie would probably have that experience quite a bit. Like I could read her mind, and she could probably read my mind. And I'm sure there's times where I could probably read your guys' mind because we're in, and maybe that's not the right use of the word telepathy, but I would think it's. I mean, I would think there's something going on there that's not just electromagnetic. It's like a communion, like you somehow your consciousnesses are even connecting without words. It's hard to get it, but I think people even have this experience with their animals and stuff too.
It seems that I have a materialist explanation for this.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
I think it's probably likely that we have a common set of experiences, so the experiences that we have together that trigger an association in my mind are likely to occur to your mind as well, especially after you're processing the signals that my body language is emitting. So I think it's pretty likely that you could make a really well-informed guess about what I'm thinking at a certain moment, but not always. Like if I try to draw something random to my mind and we play 20 questions where you don't get any questions, and we did that game 1,000 times, I think your results would be pretty poor.
Yeah, I guess I mean, I understand that aspect of it, but I think I mean, I personally, I guess I believe of it on even a higher level with like I where it's not just a familiarity, like there's actually, man, I don't know the right way to describe it.
Well,
So
let's
there's,
do it. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
and this, well, I was just gonna give an example, but it hasn't actually happened to me personally. But I mean, I could maybe give a more personal example, but it'd probably be a story that I would have to ask the person to tell first. But so the one that's not related to me, when I mentioned this to you guys before too, is where a friend of mine, Mike, and his friend, did I remember a name? I don't know. They both met up in a dream together. I don't even know if it was on the same night, but they had this dream, and like I don't like he had a dream that her name was Carissa, and so Mike, he had a dream, and in his dream he needed to find Carissa because she had something for him. So then it was either the next night, maybe it was the same night. She had a dream, and she was looking for him because she had something she needed to give him.
Yeah.
And then the next day or the next few days, whenever she had the dream, she ended up calling him and was like, "Hey, I had this weird dream," and so there was this weird connection of consciousnesses that I don't really necessarily know what to do with. That I don't necessarily think that even maps onto our traditional understanding of telepathy or anything, but um, I would think things like that exist too, where yeah, I don't know I mean, I don't know what to do with those experiences. Or another one like I've heard of that this actually happens a lot, but I never experiences this, is that people, I think their dogs will know when they're on their way home. Like they could still be an hour away and their dog will know when they're on their way home or something. And I'm like, I don't know how that happens. Like, how
Maybe
does
the
that?
dog knows because they come home at the same time every day.
Yeah, I guess so. But I've heard people have actually like tested this. I have no idea. I don't know. That's probably a really bad example. But
My
Mitch,
materialist explanation is it's likely that if we have enough dreams and we talk about our dreams, then there's going to be a lot in common. And part of that probably has to do with the fact that there's a pretty small subset of patterns in dreams that almost everybody experiences.
can
And so
he,
if two people share experiences, I would think that they're likely to, and it affected both of them. I imagine that they're likely to have similar dreams. At least it's a remote possibility. So if it was
yeah,
happening constantly, I think that we would.
I see what you're saying.
So it is weird. I grant you, it's weird, and I there's
I could share my story, but this would probably be one I would have to cut the recording for, or we just
Don't
not
do
share
it.
this, or we would not share this recording,
Oh, dude, cut the recording, tell it, and then jump back on.
and then hit on pause.
Yeah.
Okay, and then all right, I'll just do that. It's too
for
bad
it's
for
for
the
your for your
listeners.
for your Patreon supporters only.
Yeah, for donate $500.
You can record it, but you don't have
Okay,
to put it anywhere.
I can if you guys want to. So here's another one. Well, there's probably credibility, but so the maggot story. And John knows this one very well. So it was when I bought my house out in Polk County. Um, so I bought the house, and the whole thing with the house too, like the house just felt really creepy from the get go. So the first night I stayed there, I stayed with two friends, Michael and Nick, his brother, and they could both confirm this still. Like all of us had nightmares. Like that was the night I saw the hag lady again. Like I woke up out of my dream, like half conscious, half asleep, probably still, and her face was right here, and I sat up and went through her face. So like there was just in the house, like when people talk, I don't know if it was haunted, I don't know, just a bad evil presence sort of thing. Um, then like over time, I just stayed there. Then like my parents came over and prayed in it too, but they were always in the back rooms of the house, even to the day I moved out. If you went all the way to the back on the like bottom floor, all the way the last room, like kind of on the left, I would not sleep in. I would not. I think I slept in there once the entire 10 years I lived there. The room on the right, I slept in there maybe a week, trying to like see, I'm just gonna sleep in here till this bad presence leaves, whatever this bad feeling is. I gave up after a week. I was like, I'm not doing it. Those two rooms, I would not. Even by the time I moved out, I just always kept the doors closed. So I don't know. They could have been okay by the time I left, but they never really felt right to me. Even my sister said the same thing. They never felt right about those rooms.
It's
But,
a feng shui.
yeah. So that to say, that's neither here nor there. I mean, that's just kind of giving I guess the arena, whatever description of this. But so the maggot story is like when I first moved in there, um, every time I bought a trash can, like I bought it from Walmart. It was a new trash can or whatever, and I would sit outside and I'd put my trash in it. Then once a week I'd take it down in the driveway and they'd come pick it up. Um, it did not matter what I put in the trash can. I could put a trash bag full of paper. If I opened that trash can, it would literally be crawling. Maggots would be crawling out of it, like thousands upon thousands of maggots every single time. Like there would be flies flying around it. Like I would open it up, like it didn't matter. Like it could be empty too, and there'd be a pool of maggots at the bottom, and they'd be crawling out over the sides. I always felt horrible for the garbage men because I was just thinking like they've gotta hate this, like hate me because they go to empty my trash and it's just maggots piled on top of each other, like just crawling out everywhere. So this happened for like the longest time, and I don't even remember what switched, like, or if anything switched. I just remember staying there. I remember while the only thing, and I don't know if this is proper to like attribute it to it, but while like I used to be heavily addicted to porn, and while I was living in the house, like I kind of broke that addiction. So I don't know if that had something to do with it. I don't necessarily think it did per se because I think that whatever maggot manifestation was there before I got there. Um, But it was like, so that's the only thing I can kind of think of. But then one day, so like that happened, and that was just always that was just how it was. Like I hated it because it was grossed me out. I hate maggots anyway. But then one day I came home from work. I remember coming home and I had my two dogs. I had Louis and Verona, and I remember I just got home from work. I wasn't really paying attention. I just opened the front door, and so you go into my house. When you would go into my house, there's a and you had been there, Craig, right? I think, yeah. And so like there's that kind of living room there. You never went to it? Oh no, because we just went out to walk. We never did go. But you go in, so it was all hardwood floors. So there's like a living room, and then there was a little step up, and it was the kitchen area. And then there was a dog door on the back of the kitchen door. And so I just started walking in, and then I just wasn't paying attention, and I step up into the kitchen, and then I'm like walking towards the back door a little bit, and I just noticed my floor's white, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And literally my entire kitchen floor, except for maybe like uh so I would say probably uh like 7/8 of the entire kitchen floor was covered in maggots. Like there was like it was literally like just white everywhere. And my first thought is to rationalize it and be like, there's got to be a dead animal in here. The dogs probably drug in a deer, and all these maggots poured out, and then they drug the body back out. Like I'm just trying to rationalize in my head because that's just like I had no categories for it. And then in my living room, there was and so like the kitchen was almost completely covered. Like I mean, there was a little bit because I was like kind of standing in there. There were spots, but then in the living room, like every corner of the house was just full of like probably like a at least 3 foot square, like 3 foot by 3 foot pool of maggots as well, like in the living room, like in every corner. It was really strange. And then, so like I even went out back and there was no like dead animal or anything. Even if there was, like that doesn't explain it. They could have like there's not going to be that many maggots in one animal. And so I just remember like I just like broke down and like started crying because I was just so disgusted. I didn't know what to do. I was like, what the heck? Like it was just like kind of shattered me. So I called my mom and told her, and then she like eventually came over, and I think she helped me clean up the last bit of it because I just started spraying them with, I think I had Windex or something. I was just spraying the maggots so they would just die, and then I was trying to sweep them all up, and it was. But then after that, though, there was never another maggot in my trash can. Like, isn't that weird? Like, it was just really freaking weird.
Dude, me and Craig have a good maggot story.
Do you?
I want to hear you tell it. Jason, I got to tell you, that story's bananas.
Yeah. So I can't
That's
explain
scary.
that one away. Yeah, that's gross.
Oh man.
Here's this maggot story.
No, it's for almond tree after midnight.
What?
I'm
You're
gonna
gonna
hop
say
off the
no?
line.
What? What?
Love you
Really?
guys.
All right.
Thanks for the laughs.
All right.
See you, man.
See ya. All right, man. Well,
Mm.
you gotta go too, or you gonna share the story?
I don't feel like I should share it without his presence. In fact, I think I need to hear him tell it.
All right. All right.
But let's put a pin in the maggot story because we'll have to talk about that at some point.
Okay. Yeah, we can. I don't know if I should share any of this. It's up to you guys. I can if you.
It
if you want me
doesn't
to.
matter to me.
I don't care. It seemed a little bit scattered, but then there's a long pause and come back with a maggot story. So I don't know.
Hmm.
All right, man. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for doing this. Sorry to keep
Oh
you up so
yeah,
late.
it's got to be late. It's later for you.
Yeah, it's 1:20 in the morning.
Get out of here.
Yeah, that's same time for Mitch too, I think. So
It's brutal.
yeah.
Let's keep talking.
All right.
Not
Not at the moment.
in general. Let's do this more often.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime. I'm usually free, and I've been having a lot more free time.
How's your writing going?
Oh, yeah, I actually mentioned that right before. That's what I was doing when I saw your text. I was I wasn't writing, I was reading through some stuff I'd already written because I haven't written in a while. I wrote like maybe a paragraph or two while I was in India, and that's the most I think I've gotten done. What about you?
Scattered, but it's coming.
That's good. Cool. I'd be
Well,
interested to read some.
we should meet again soon and refresh our commitment.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I need to get back on it. I've been wanting to. I just I haven't, but I think rereading some stuff has kind of like maybe helped me get the
Mm.
gears turning again. So,
Nice.
all right, man.
Thanks for
Well,
recording
thanks.
this, man, and thanks for always doing the work to make this happen. And
This is fun. Yeah.
you know,
This I love this. You guys are my pals. Anytime we
Me-
get to talk, it's a treat for me. So,
me too, man. I'll catch you later.
all right, see you, man. Have a good night.
See ya. You too.